We ready?
But I made the menu go.
Good afternoon to all council members. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Texas Industrialized Building Code Council meeting of Friday, January 26, 2018. With that, I'd like to call roll and certify quorum. So, Mr. Roland Brown.
Here.
Mr. Randy Childress.
Here.
Mr. Brian Eisenrich. Mr. Brian Eisenrich. Mr. Steve Fitzpatrick.
Here.
Mr. Eddie Martin. Mr. Eddie Martin. Mr. Scott McDonald. Mr. Scott McDonald. Mr. Mark Remmert.
Here.
Mr. Jesse Ryder.
Here.
Mr. Doug Robinson. Here. Mr. William Dub Smith. Mr. Dub Smith. Okay, we have 7 members, including the chairperson, present for the meeting. We've reached a quorum. We have. So, ladies and gentlemen, with that, we'll move on to our item C on our agenda, approval of meeting minutes from January 23rd, 2017. Council, if you'll review your meeting minutes and let me know if anybody has any questions or need for discussion.
I have a correction. Top of page 2. My last name is misspelled. Move to approve.
Roland Brown, I second.
I've got a motion to approve and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving on to council, if you'll allow me to reorganize the agenda just to kind of help flow the meeting. We will, and I look forward to handing over the chair and vice chairmanship, but I'd like to push agenda item D, election of new chair and vice chair, down to one of the last items of the council for the day. Does anybody have any objections to that? Okay, then moving on, if I may, then we're going to jump over to agenda item E, staff reports. Staff?
Good afternoon, Chairman and board members. My name is Chloe Whalen, Licensing Manager. I just have a update of processing for you. You'll notice that the report looks a little different with new numbers on there for different license types. My team now will do the licensing for the designer review agencies, third-party inspectors, and the inspection agencies. All technical questions will still be sent to the compliance department for IHB. And that concludes my report. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, thank you. Is any questions from council? Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Customer service?
Good afternoon, Chairman and members. Thank you for being here this afternoon. You have probably heard of customer service. My name is Trey Seals, and I am the Director of the Customer Service Division. You've heard of us, but you hadn't seen or heard from us. So we decided that several of us decided, not just my area, that needed to change. So I'm here to give a brief introduction more for this particular report on who we are and what we do and why we do it. So we are a 50-person group, a hardworking team, a wonderful team of people with heart, and we engage the customers in a day-by-day basis, call by call. So we really are there to hear, to ask questions, and to resolve any issues that come up and get folks where they need to be we act primarily, especially for the IHB program, as guides and communicate information both to internal areas and then externally back to customers. So we don't do a lot of in-depth answering of technical questions or anything of that nature. If it's on the site and easily found, we'll point that out and help customers on their way. One of the things that is a motto of ours is that we are there to reduce customer effort. So one of our things is, as we're doing our day-to-day, we're always keeping an eye out for how we can improve processes and make it easier. It's been a challenging, exciting time. It's the new year, the new programs that we took on in November, so there's a lot going on for us right now, and for the agency as a whole, but we're working really hard to serve both your constituents and the rest of our licensee population. Just to talk briefly about the statistics, which should be in your report for the first quarter and now the month of December. As you can see, we don't get a lot of email, especially, and we don't get that many phone calls, but we do take each phone call as important and our top priority. So we handle those calls, and it averages around, it looks to be about 30 to 40 calls per month on average, and then of course in December things dip down for the holidays.
Trey, Mary Winston, TLR. I'm just not loving this report because Trey just said they have 2 phone calls or 2 emails. And because this is customer services first presentation, I don't think that they're understanding what
Yes.
you do.
That was coming next, but
Okay.
I will happily.
Because I'm like,
I like
Trey just
hearing
said there are 50 people,
yes,
and they answered 2 emails.
yes,
And 42, and so they do a whole lot more.
yes.
But I'm gonna wait and just be dazzled.
So to put that in perspective, as Mary has very eloquently stated, absolutely agree. Why would we have 50 people? And that is because we did have 500,000 contacts in the last fiscal year. So
Thank you.
that translates to, right now anyway, in terms of the current statistics for the contact center, we're at about 2,000 calls per day and about 400 emails as well. So as you can see by that number, we stay super busy. And that's where that need for continual attention to how we can do better helps us to continue to get to those contacts in a timely fashion. So just a quick description: most of our agents work on the 6th floor in our downtown location, and we also have agents who work from home. We have several tools available to us, of course, call routing software and all kinds of statistical reports to give us an understanding of where our calls are coming in, where are we having gaps, what are the issues that need to be addressed. We've got that data displayed everywhere. We can place it so that folks are reminded, okay, this is what we're here for. And we're, as Mary described at one point, that duck on the water. We're happy. We have to be. We have to be empathetic, but we are kicking underneath the surface to keep, the operations going and to keep things consistent and to keep our service consistent. So, as I said, it's an interesting time right now, but we're learning new strategies. We're implementing new software to help us keep up and to do well at the work that we have in front of us. That does, at this point, conclude my report, but I entertain any questions if you have them.
Counsel?
Randy Childers. Based on the numbers that you gave, why does it just show 42 calls and 2 emails for September if it's 2,000-ish?
Right. This represents, and that'll be something that I will include in future reports. I will include the actual breakdown of the top 10 by volume of the programs that we get calls for. This simply represents solely the industrialized housing and building context. But yeah, it is quite a mix of contacts that we receive each day. Yeah. Not,
And,
my pleasure.
Mary Winston, I'm just going to add just a little bit more to it. I did suggest that he do that because we need you to understand, we need everyone to understand how much work they really do. Customer service is a first line. Trey talked about contacts. Contacts equals calls, emails, walk-ins. What am I missing?
Calls, emails, walk-ins, social media.
Social media, they handle all of that. So when he says 2,000 contacts a day,
Yes.
that incorporates all of those contacts.
Yes.
Also, they have teams, there's software. If you walk into the customer service division, they know who's on the phone, how long they've been on the phone, what the issue is on the phone. It's a constant, I mean, they really are, they're under the water just, pedaling away. Your program is not a program that we take a lot of calls and emails from. However, we have a lot of other programs, larger programs that require a lot of other contacts. This is new. We wanted our advisory boards to know, we wanted the public to know how much work goes into customer service, and how hard they try, and their successes as well as their growth, as well as failures that lead to growth.
Absolutely.
And how we're moving forward to service the public. What I love about customer service, one of the things I love, is that he can tell you which trends are coming in your profession. We can say, what's the most common question that comes across via email? Trey can get that for you because we have that. And as he's presented this report to other boards, they've asked for that information.
Yeah.
And he had an answer off the bat, and then he can get more deeply into that answer. So as this grows, I think the report will grow, and Trey won't be so shy about really representing how much his team really does. They work awfully hard. And if there are questions about different trends and different questions within your profession, many times we go to customer service. Even if the response comes from compliance, enforcement, advisory boards, customer service has a part in creating that response.
Yes.
So I just wanted to fluff it out a little bit
Thank
to kind
you.
of give a
Thank you.
more of a three-dimensional picture.
Thank you. Thank you.
Troy, thank you. Counsel?
I have one more. Mary, thank you. Randy Childers, thank you for the fluffing, because 50 employees and 2 emails doesn't look government.
See, I
make
told
government
you,
look so
see, it
good.
was so confusing. We had to get that.
I appreciate
Understood.
that.
Thank you. My pleasure. Yes, sir.
Steve Fitzpatrick, just to clarify, so you're the first point of contact, so in this case, the people that want to talk about industrialized housing issues contact you, then do you handle that there, or does it then get turned over to some other agency? Where
Well,
does
in
it
this
go from
case, in this case, most of our contacts for this program are handled by our compliance folks.
Okay.
Most of the questions are, if they're of a technical nature, will be handled by our subject matter experts.
Okay.
So it is a slight difference, and there are relationships with, directly with some of the compliance staff. So they wouldn't necessarily, after they've made that initial contact, come back through customer service to get assistance.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Roland. Trey, how do people know that you exist? I'm assuming that you're there more for the consumer.
We are there for the
So
consumer.
how
Absolutely.
does the consumer know that your function exists and the importance of that function? Because obviously, there's always a conduit problem between the public and the government.
Sure.
So how do people know that you're there to help?
Primarily through our website. We are on every program page and how to reach out to us with further questions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Doug Robinson.
Yes.
Trey, have you switched all incoming calls to go through the customer service center?
Yes, sir.
So
The majority of the.
if I dial Donna's office,
Well, okay.
it's gonna, no, not
Understand.
directly, but
Mhm.
if I call IHB,
Right.
it's gonna come to you first.
Right. If you dial the 800 number or the local number, it will come through customer service.
And do you have certain individuals that are keyed for IHB and a couple other programs to where they become specialists somewhat?
We do. Yeah, there is a direct number, though, for the IHB program, and that is also on that program page. So the IHB program is slightly different. Our information is also there in the bottom right-hand corner of each program main page, But for the more technical aspects of the program, they're going to call Donna directly. They probably already know Donna by name, and if they do happen to call in through customer service, they're going to ask for Donna.
But y'all have that capability?
We do. And we some things we realized, okay, this is going to be something we're going to defer to our subject matter experts, because we are there and we are charged with knowing a lot of the beginning stages for all of the programs. And we do have some specialization, but yeah, some of these programs are a little more technical, and we are not tasked with understanding the nuance and the details. So we
But
try.
moreover, pretty
not
much
to get
every
into that.
incoming call gets answered,
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
so that, if they're not available, it rolls over, so there's a
Yes,
response.
sir. And we also have a callback feature that we can follow up, and then we also get quite a bit of email
Very good.
that we respond to.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. My pleasure.
Counsel? Trey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Enforcement Division?
Good afternoon. My name is Robin Glassner. I am a enforcement prosecutor, and I will be giving the Enforcement Division staff report today. Before you are 3 cases. These happen to be the only 3 cases that went to orders. So orders are what are signed by Brian, our executive director. So these are the only 3 that had penalties assessed, which is what an order does, since the last council meeting in April. And what was included in your materials is just a brief statement on what happened in each of these cases. The first one was signed in July 2017. It was a default order, so it means that the respondent didn't respond. And a $3,000 penalty was assessed for the violation of entering into a contract to sell an industrialized house without first being licensed. That was case number 1. And then case number 2 was signed on November 28th, 2017, and that was also a default order. And in that particular case, there was a $1,000 fine assessed for failing to provide documents to the department that had been requested for an audit. And then the very last case is an order that was also signed on November 28th, 2017. That one was an agreed order, so it was entered into between the department and the respondent. Agreed. And that penalty was $3,000 for 2 violations of the 2009 Industrial Residential Code and for failing to properly secure and industrialize housing to a permanent foundation system. And that order has been paid in full. Are there any questions about the 3 orders?
Robin, if I may, so on case number 1,
Mm-hmm.
Lane Industries, are they still in existence? Do you know if they're still practicing some type of construction, or?
So the way that these are all complaint cases, we have different types of cases, but what happened in this particular one is a complainant filed a complaint with the department, and because we have to operate within our statute, we're only able to assess a penalty and then see if we get an additional complaint. We have a process that we go through. We don't have direct injunction power. We have to go through the Attorney General for that. So it depends upon the overall circumstances of what happens with each respondent, whether or not it's something egregious enough that we feel we have to go straight to the AG. Normally that's a very rare occurrence for us. In this particular case, it looks like we assess the penalty, and then we either, because it's hard to tell what happened, because from our mail delivery, it looks like one of the pieces of mail was unclaimed, and then the other piece was just undeliverable, which could be for any number of factors. So it's unclear exactly where this person might be. They might have just stopped operating altogether. Their registered agent might not actually be at the address that they gave to Secretary of State. We have very minimal ways of being able to chase that person down. So as far as the determination in that case, we move forward for the unlicensed activity. If another couple of complaints were to come in, we would then start probably doing more research to find out if this is a really, really, really bad actor that we need to forward on to another department, which would be AG.
Counsel?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Childers?
I think on the third one, I know you mean 2017, not 2107, November.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
And in the second line at the end, international residential code instead of industrial, I'm supposing, because I don't know, I don't think there is an industrial I think you meant the international residential code, which is the IRC.
Oh, okay. That's
Yes,
probably.
thank you for that.
Sorry
Is that-
about that. And there's also one more on the bottom. It should read January 26, 2018 instead of 2017. So I apologize for those mistakes.
And Robin, if I may, moving on to the second case, do we know if Calvary Homes is a IHB licensed manufacturer with this program?
They are.
Did the missing documentation finally get provided, or did they just pay a fee and in return not have to provide documentation?
To my knowledge, there still has not been documentation provided. But that also means that we filed the case and then tried to contact them, or we filed our notice, tried to contact them, and they didn't respond. A default is when we don't hear from the other party and we need to close, like we need to keep moving the case forward. And we wait at least 30 days before even sending a notice of default, then that takes us at least another 20 days. And it takes another at least 10 days before it'll even reach our executive director's office. So they have a wide range of time before we just send it off to our executive director. I don't believe these documents ever reach our compliance division because there's nothing in the case file that shows that. But they could have contacted compliance and us not find out about it. It's rare, but it could happen. But compliance doesn't have access to our legal file system, so if they were to be contacted but not know that there's a case open, which is very oftentimes the case, then they could have received the documents but us not know about it, or they might have sent them to us and somehow they didn't get to them. Like other things can happen.
But this issue started within the compliance department.
Right.
So they are aware that your department is having legal discussions with Calvary Homes LLC.
I mean, because it does take time for it to get to us. Well, at least for it to get to a prosecutor, because we normally have an investigator trying to help us out as well. I mean, people might forget that they filed a complaint.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Mary Winston.
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect world scenario, whereas our memories are perfect and everything's perfect. Yes, this came from compliance for failure to provide documentation. So if that documentation has been provided, no, enforcement would not receive that knowledge. It would pursue an enforcement case. However, we can get that information. We can find that out from compliance. It's just nothing that Robin would seek to find out in an enforcement case. Once the penalty has been assessed and paid, compliance doesn't necessarily reach out to enforcement and say, hey, they finally turned it in. But we can get that information if you'd like to know that information.
My interest in knowing is more related to a process where how do you we just got Trey to tell us of their management of statistics and understanding of information that's coming in. How do we manage which manufacturers continue to have open compliance issues while our compliance office continues to work with them, bring their names up for licensing or relicensing, and keep presenting to the public that they have the ability to continue in this industry? I mean, at some point, we need to, I think, close out these items, and one of the most drastic and dramatic ways, which I'm not in favor of, light-handedly is to pull somebody's licensing. And so I'm just kind of curious how enforcement works with compliance to ultimately bring that in front of either this council or the executive director and say, we really need to do something here.
If this happens again, compliance would again notify enforcement. It would be a second violation. If it happened again, and with every violation for our penalty matrix, the, I don't want to say punishment, the penalty goes up, depending on which violation it is, and ultimately, your ultimate violation would incorporate losing your license. So it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. This type of complaint, oh, Donna, do you want to go to the table? She's up. Nope, you got to go to the microphone.
Come on up.
And Robin Glassner for enforcement. And another thing to remember with, there is a lot of discussion between enforcement and compliance. We rely on each other for a lot of things. None of us prosecutors are experts in the field the way our compliance division would be. We work very closely with each other at all times. All programs do. So if there's ever any kinds of reports that we could run for compliance to find out if somebody is a bad actor or if there has been a bunch of both consumer complaints and internal complaints being filed, we can get that information very easily, and we can get that to anybody who needs it.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, this Calvary was an industrialized builder, okay? And if Catherine had gotten the documents that she needed, she would have let enforcement know. So, because she's the one that opens those complaint cases. So if she gets the documents, she sends it on to the person who has the complaint in enforcement. So I don't think Calvary Homes is in business anymore, or they're not registered with us anymore.
Okay.
So,
So we're closing loops.
yeah.
Counsel?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Zach
Mr.
Robinson. Really, compliance controls the case as it moves forward, but you seek enforcement when you need to take action.
We try to get compliance, and if we can't get compliance, then we turn it over to enforcement.
But enforcement wouldn't independently escalate something without an investigator. I
Or without,
mean,
they would interact with us, yes.
So before they took further action, they would come back and say, hey, what's going on?
I hope they would, yes. I would assume they would. So.
Yes.
I mean, everything depends on the situation. If you ask an attorney, they're going to tell you it depends. There's always a situation where, maybe we feel that public health and safety is being threatened and we need to take immediate action. I can't think of a circumstance where we wouldn't go to compliance, but I can't say that it wouldn't happen either. But most likely, compliance would know if we were doing something that was particularly outrageous, or we felt that there was a significant threat, we would most likely be talking to compliance as well, or they would have alerted us to it. And in this particular case, we had a lot of well-documented actions that had been taken by compliance to get this information, and it wasn't just, they didn't do it once, they didn't do it several times. And that's probably why we were forwarded the
Right.
complaint case to begin with, because it wasn't just a one-off shoot. This had been several times. And now this affected 6 homes versus just 2 or 3, which is what had happened in the past. And as far as like getting that information, once our case is closed, it's harder for us to be knowing what we would keep up with after that, because from an enforcement standpoint, the case is closed with the signed order. And if compliance had additional information after that, that maybe we needed to open a new case or some other action needed to occur, they could come back and tell us that. But in this particular case, it would be the assumption that they didn't receive the report since we never received any information that they had. And the prosecutor working the case probably would have contacted somebody in compliance to double check before we were moving forward.
And I can also presume that the individual Calvary homes who would have turned over the documentation that was missing, it would have behooved them on their behalf to tell enforcement, we have turned this over and here's proof of.
Right, and
who
if
we
they had
spoke.
done that, we would have closed the case, but that information never came to light. And not knowing what the situation was as far as their license goes, if it's still active, or even if it's been expired for a little bit, then we're gonna assume they're still operating. And we at least wanna move forward with our enforcement case without any information being brought.
Does the IHB program have an ability or have a quarterly or annual letter indicating what all the enforcement actions taken are?
We don't do enforcement, so that's a no, yeah. But
What all enforcement actions have been taken through failure to comply with the IHB requirements?
that would be, I think they're published, when they're closed, I think they're published on the website.
So there, it is published.
Cases that go forward to an order.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, not open investigations, but just cases that went all the way to an order and
Right.
Right, where if a penalty was assessed, then it would go on the website. If the case was closed with a closing letter or warning letter, which are the other two ways that a case could be disposed of, then that information won't appear on the website.
And the point being, should the consuming public want to be informed of any enforcement action taken through a compliance issue with the IHB board that led to an order, the consumer can find it on the website and identify whether or not they want to go into contract with or engage with that company.
Yeah.
Okay.
All that's on the website, and open records also, if someone wanted to file a written open records request requesting that information, we would go through the open records policy, and enforcement could provide that information.
Just more of an ease of information and transparency to the consumer, that's all. Okay. Counsel? Anything further?
I don't know if you would like me to go through
Please,
the
please.
statistics part. The first set for fiscal 2017, the number of cases open for IHB was 15, while the number of cases resolved was 12. And then the number of agreed orders entered were 2. But this is for whole of fiscal year 2017, so that is, our fiscal year starts on September 1st and ends August 31st. So that's the range in there. This can also include cases that were older that we have been trying to work with both parties to get settled. So that's why the numbers may not look like they equal each other. And some cases also would have carried over to the next fiscal year just because of how big an IHB case can be. And then the second set of statistics that were provided are the current fiscal 2018 year. So we have, in enforcement, we've opened 7 cases, and then 5 cases have been resolved, and 1 case has gone to an agreed order. I'm sorry?
That's the one case listed above.
I
the agreed
believe
order.
so. The one
This
that
would have been September 1, 17, now
yes.
fiscal 18,
Yes.
right? Mr. Chair, I have one other question. I think Rob just answered it. In the fiscal year 2017 stats, the number of cases resolved is higher than the number open, so that's the carryover cases that you were talking about from even a previous fiscal year?
So that
the
could
reason
have
number's
been.
higher?
Well, so the number of cases opened was 15, and the number of cases resolved was 12. So that number, that 12 number for resolved could include cases carried over from any additional years, any previous years before that. If it's an IHB, like complaint case coming in from a complainant, these cases take a long time if there are a lot of issues with them. So we tend to carry over a couple of cases every fiscal year just because we're constantly trying to work on whittling down, either numbers of violations or getting the case closed and trying to make both sides happy. So that's why you might see some kind of variance between the numbers.
Out of current fiscal year, out of 2,362 cases open for the TDLR, broader enforcement, we're only 7, so we're not causing a lot of headaches here. I am curious, though, are you seeing in these 7, not the same individual, but the same type of compliance concerns that requires you to open up a case and engage via the enforcement?
I can tell you, I'm one of only 3 attorneys that work these cases, so, and I'm not new to the agency, but I'm new to these programs, and I started with these programs in October. And so I have cases that are older that I inherited from another prosecutor, and my cases are, for the most part, building issues, and those are all older cases. I've only seen one sort of newer case come in. So as far as the 7 that are open right now, I'm not 100% sure what the issues were with all of them. I received a notification that I had one that was still in investigation. The investigator was still working with compliance before it was going to get to me, and that's probably one of the 7 included. But my coworkers have their own caseloads. I'm not sure what kind of cases that they're looking at right now, because IHB cases are very large. We try and look to see what the issues are first, and then if there's a deadline coming up, work it as soon as we can to beat the deadline, and then go on from there. So I'm not 100% sure what they're seeing.
Robin, if I may, I'd like to ask Donna to just engage in just a moment. Donna, does the IHB staff, compliance staff, monitor or data track the type of compliance issues that are being sent to enforcement so we can identify what, if anything, we might be able to better warn industry, better warn consumers of, as you engage in these contractual relationships, these are some of the common pitfalls?
Mr. Chair, you're looking for common violations?
Yes.
Okay, Donna, we're just stalling until she gets to the microphone.
Oh.
Because even with the microphone, you might not be able to hear me. So. No, we don't track the violations. We don't really have the staff to do that. We do see a lot of the same things when they're consumer complaints, though. It usually has to do with the foundation and the installation of the house. Like the foundation doesn't match the foundation design on the plans, or the design engineer for the house says you have to have a continuous foundation wall around it, but that's not what was designed for the foundation. We see a large number of different violations.
So it sounds like, and I'd be interested if staff could try to identify where we're generating some continuous failure points, not within the program, but within the execution of the work. Is it in the manufacturing? Is it in the installation? Is it in the misunderstanding of expectations between consumer? I thought I was going to get a Rolls Royce, and the Geo showed up. What?
Majority of the problems have to do with the installation. What we see coming out of the factories usually isn't the problem. Usually. That's not always, but usually. We can probably provide a report on that for the next meeting. I could have Brian work on that. He does the consumer complaint cases now. So.
I would appreciate it.
We also, when we do see something that we think needs addressing as what the code says about this issue, we try to issue a technical bulletin. Those are out on our website. So we try to address some things like that. Again, it's when we have time to get to it, though, too. So we don't.
You can use some of the customer service guys. They only have 2 calls.
They don't understand the issues. They don't understand the issues. They couldn't. Yeah.
Thank you for indulging my poor joke. Okay. Counsel? Okay. Ms. Glossner, anything else?
So for enforcement, unless you guys have any other questions?
Thank you. Okay. Item 4, Compliance Division.
I'm going to bring over here for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm Donna Lipke, Program Manager for the Industrialized Housing and Buildings Program. And let me start on the second slide there. So I will be giving the compliance report for IHB. We're going to start out with a presentation called From Factory to Installation, Industrialized Housing. At the last meeting, the council requested that we do a presentation on what happens after a house or building leaves the factory. Because there are differences between the installation requirements for industrialized housing and buildings, today's presentation will focus on industrialized housing. We hope to bring you a similar presentation at a future meeting regarding industrialized buildings, or it might just be a presentation on what the differences are. Brian Ledbetter and Mark Feiner, Program Specialists with the Igp Program, will be making today's presentation.
I'm Mark Feitner. At the last meeting, the council requested a presentation from the IHB staff covering what happens after the IHB certified building leaves the factory, the transition of responsibility with the modular building from the manufacturer to the builder, and the difference between rural versus urban or municipal governance regarding the areas of jurisdiction for a modular house. It is important to remember that modular buildings regulated by our program can vary in any occupancy type. While there are similarities between the requirements for installation and inspections between industrialized housing and industrialized buildings, there are also many differences. And for that reason, we are limiting today's presentation to the industrialized housing. The presentation will primarily provide a general understanding of the process in which a house is shipped from a factory, installed, inspected, and then occupied. There are many parallels in how commercial and residential buildings are regulated by our program, and we're happy to explain their differences and similarities in a future presentation. If there is time, we can answer any question the council might have after today's presentation. Here you can see an example of a data plate, an IHB certification label, and how not to transport a modular house. When can an industrialized house leave the factory? A house cannot be shipped until the following have completed and are verified. All factory construction must be completed, and approved plans must show that the construction is to be completed at the factory and what is to be completed at the site. All construction identified on the plans as completed at the factory must be completed before the house is ready for shipment. All inspections and tests are completed. All violations or deviations found through inspection and tests must be corrected, and the tests could include the plumbing tests, electrical, and other tests that might be required, such as duct testing and concrete testing to be completed. Certification labels and data plate are installed. The certification labels are the stickers issued by our department, and they must be on every transportable section of a modular house. Each label has a unique number on it and is linked to the manufacturer's serial number. The labels identify the house as compliant to our IHB program. Data plates are one of the most important pieces of information on a modular house. They must be permanently installed. They cannot be installed on something easily removable, like a cabinet door, or in this case, just slapped up on the wall. The important design information about this house is found on a data plate, and these would be the applicable codes, like the IRC, the NEC, and IECC, loading information such as wind speed, snow load, and seismic design category and site class, manufacturer's name, address, and registration number, special conditions or limitations on the house. This information that the local officials may need to know about the installation of the house, such as minimum distance from a lot line. Local authorities rely on the data plate to verify the house is suitable for the installation at the site. It is the manufacturer's responsibility to verify they are releasing the house only to an industrialized builder or a residential installation permit holder. The manufacturers report to our department at the end of the month who they release the house to.
So what are registered builders and installation permit holders? Here in this slide, we've got a copy of a certificate for a registered builder there on the left and a residential installation permit here on the right. The information contained in both of these documents is pretty straightforward. However, there's some information here on the residential installation permit that we'll cover in just a moment. So generally speaking, both of these parties are responsible for the majority of the construction on site. And we'll get more into the response to the specifics here in just a moment of each of these, their responsibilities. The builder's registration costs $325 and is valid for 1 year. As long as that registration is valid, a builder can install as many houses as they wish under that registration. Builders can take responsibility for the entire installation or just some parts, and if they take responsibility for just some parts, that's where the residential installation permit comes into play. When this path is chosen, the permit holder will choose just the parts that they're wanting to take responsibility for, and that's in this section here. So in today's DIY environment, the installation permit offers a builder a level of protection when the homeowner wishes to complete any of the work themselves or hire their own subcontractors. The installation permit costs $75, can only be applied for by the homeowner or the end user, and it's only applicable for one house or one address. And with this, the homeowner can choose to do the work themselves or they can hire their own subcontractors. Both of these are issued by TDLR. The builder's registration is processed by TDLR's licensing department. This residential installation permit is processed by IHB program staff. So when builders receive their registration certificate, they also get this one-page bulletin that details their responsibilities in as clear and concise fashion as possible. And in the next couple of slides, Mark's going to detail what those things are on this document.
Okay, on this slide here, you can see wheels up. It's not a good thing to see when you're on an inspection site. Obviously, the industrial builders needs to be aware of what they're doing and be safe. We just hope that nobody was actually injured on this site. So what are industrialized builders responsible for? They must obtain site-specific installation plans, foundation, crawl space, stairs, etc. A registered engineer or an architect must prepare a foundation plan that is unique for the house and site-specific. When factories have their plans approved, they are required to include information in the designs that assist the local designer in designing the site-specific details. These would include critical load points, minimum requirements for connection to the foundation, and details for modular connections. It is not uncommon for new builders to try to use the manufacturer's generic foundation plan as an actual installation design. This is not acceptable. Foundation designers should use the manufacturer's approved documents to assist in the design of the foundation. Foundation plans must be detailed and specific and contain such items as design loads and soil bearing capacity, reinforcement placement in concrete, size, configuration and depth below grade of footings, material specification. Other site-specific details are required as well, such as grading requirements, stairs and egress components, crawl spaces, and enclosures. Industrialized builders are responsible to ensure their subcontracted tradespeople are licensed for their trades in Texas. This includes plumbers, electrical contractors, and AC contractors. The builder is also responsible for scheduling inspections, coordinate the inspections with the proper entities, and we'll go more into that later. They're also to ensure system testing is conducted satisfactorily, such as plumbing, gas, testing of duct systems, and blower door test. They must also pull any local permits, retain, and provide all documents as necessary. Must ensure all local permitting, zoning, and setback requirements are adhered to. Must maintain documentations and be able to produce the proper documents if audited by IHB. Lastly, they must provide the homeowner with the documents, such as house plans, including the unique on-site construction details and foundation plans, a final inspection report, and consumer notice. Most importantly, they must supply the TDLR's address and contact information for the purpose of submitting complaints. Okay. Here's one of our nice covered bridges out in East Texas. Obviously, there's a reason why these rural bridges have their weight limits posted. Residential installation permit holders, what are they responsible for? They have the same responsibilities as a builder. This depends on what is checked on the application. For example, if the homeowner takes responsibility for the foundation, then they are responsible for the designs from an architect or engineer. They are required to obtain inspections for the items for which they are responsible for, and these items still are required to be code compliant. Homeowners usually only take responsibility for some items, such as porches, decks, stairs, guardrails, plumbing, yet some may take more responsibility for larger, complicated projects with the installations, such as foundation, grading, electrical, mechanical, attached carport, or garage. And there are some who will even take on all construction aspects that needs to be completed on site. Again, the installation permits are only applicable for one house, one address. Only the homeowner may apply for an installation permit. So who conducts these site inspections? Generally, there are two different situations that determine who does the site inspections. Occupation of the house, however, is never acceptable until it has passed final inspection. Just a side note here about this multi-story modular building on this slide. Under current law, this building would not fall under the IHB program due to the number of stories above grade. We included it in today's presentation to illustrate the innovation that's coming out of the modular industry. For buildings installed inside a jurisdiction that has a building department, all site inspections are conducted by the local building department. Required paperwork, documentation, number of inspections are up to the local building department, and the local department should provide some documentation of a past final inspection or a certificate of occupancy after all inspections are successfully completed and the house is ready to move in. For buildings installed outside a municipality or inside a jurisdiction without a building department, site inspections must be conducted by a council-approved inspector. A minimum of 3 inspections are required under the IHB rules. A pre-pour before concrete is poured, but after the foundation forms are constructed and steel reinforcement is installed. A set inspection. This is to verify the anchorage to the foundation and the module connections. A final. These are utilities are to be hooked up, all construction completed, all testing completed, and the house is ready for occupancy. Additional inspections may be necessary if violations are noted during the inspection, and the construction to correct these items may take additional time.
So, what authority does a local building department have over modular buildings? Local building departments have control over land use and zoning, building setbacks, planning, and other similar requirements. However, from our experience, some of the smaller jurisdictions may not be fully aware of their what they are responsible, what their scope of authority is, where their minimum responsibilities begin and end. So first we'll cover things that the locals do have authority to ask for and what they are responsible for inspecting. So first, they can request and review the factory's approved plans. Now that may seem a little counterintuitive, but they do have the ability to do that. If upon review they find violations to the mandatory building codes adopted by the IHB program, they can require them to be fixed. They can and should request the site-specific foundation plan and any unique on-site construction details. This is what they're going to use to conduct all their site inspections. When it comes time for inspections, they can inspect both, and they should inspect the site-completed items, but they also have to, they could inspect the factory-completed components as well. The same caveat kind of exists as far as operating under the mandatory building codes under the IHB, but we'll get into that in a minute. So all site work that affects the modular building must be per the site-specific plans that have been generated by the design professional. And these can include things like module-to-module connections, hinged roof or roof dormer installations, site-constructed porches, garages, foundation anchorage, lots of things. And finally, they can and should enforce local zoning, setbacks, aesthetic standards, and along with those items, they have the authority to control deed restrictions, subdivision control, minimum landscaping requirements, site planning, development, property line requirements, even preservation of historic districts or equivalent valuations. So in this slide, in this picture here, you can see the newer installation there on the left and then the older house here on the right. The local might have ordinances requiring the new modular house to meet certain valuation or aesthetic standards to fit in, and under the law, that would be permissible. So this is kind of a continuation of the last slide here. And this picture kind of relates. Oh, there we go. A little more to the last slide than this one. However, I felt it was important to include this because this is the type of house that could blur the lines of responsibility between the local and the manufacturers and where the inspections start and stop at the factory and begin at the installation site. So as you can tell, this has got a steep roof pitch, with the roof that's likely erected in multiple sections. There's probably a dormer going to come here. There's likely a little tag unit that's going to hook up front that will also tie in, a tall gable end wall. There's all kinds of things that are going to be done on site to this house. So relatively speaking, there's quite a bit. So, where do the inspections at the manufacturer stop and the local begin? It's not rocket science, but if the designers, the builders, permit holders, local authorities are not familiar with their scope of oversight, there's a good chance things may go undesigned, underdesigned, not inspected, what have you. So, or folks may not know where to get certain design documents if they're not asking the right questions to the right people. So, for example, is there anyone here today who would like to guess at who would be responsible for designing the hinged roof connections? Any guesses? Our manufacturer's reps. I need y'all to have it. So, to kind of get back, so here we're going to cover what the local building departments do not have the authority over. They cannot enforce locally adopted codes on the factory-completed components. As we've already stated, they may review and inspect the factory-completed aspects, but they must do so to the mandatory building codes adopted by the IHB program. Currently, that's the 2015 I-codes and the 2014 NEC. And just an item of note here, since we just went through a code update last year, the factory-completed components on houses constructed prior to the 2015 I-codes and the 2014 NEC are not required to come into compliance with the later additions of when they are installed. Those houses were compliant at the time of their original manufacture, and they're still compliant now. That is. So locals may not conduct destructive inspections, so they can't tear up sheetrock, can't open up permanent construction. However, they can conduct non-destructive inspection, opening up access panels, crawling underneath the crawl space, getting in the attic if it's accessible, things of that nature. And finally, they may not reject the house simply because it showed up on wheels and it must be a mobile home. A chassis does not mean, or a steel frame under a house does not mean that the house is a HUD code manufactured house. The chassis is used as part of the floor system on many modular homes, and as such is required to meet certain building code requirements for the materials and the construction methods used. And once installed, modular homes are treated as part of the real property, and modular houses do not get titles issued from TDLR. So what happens outside of municipalities? Well, I think from this picture it's clear, well, anything can happen. Obviously not a modular house here. I just like the picture. This is a tourist attraction in, where was it? Turfins, Austria. Kind of a neat picture there. But joking aside, there are clear procedures for the inspections of modular houses installed outside of municipalities. These procedures mostly consist of third-party inspection and oversight. There's a series of inspections that Mark just already covered, the three inspections: foundation, the pre-pour, set, and final. And those inspections are conducted by, can be conducted by three types of individuals: council-approved inspectors, registered and approved third-party inspectors. So these are the types of inspectors that they can do any inspection. They can do in-plant inspections, certification inspections, site inspections, maybe special inspections if we ask them to. That would be one inspector. There's also registered and approved third-party site inspectors who are only licensed to inspect site installations. And then finally, registered engineers and architects that are on the list of engineers and architects on our website can also perform these inspections. The inspections are documented on forms provided by our department, and the inspector must complete an inspection form after every inspection. This includes re-inspections. The forms have required information on them that the inspector must verify and document the key information, and we'll get into that in the next slide. However, one thing I wanted to point out is some of the foundation specifics that we've been talking a little bit about. So on the forms, the inspector must verify that the correct foundation plans are being used, and the inspection forms specifically ask for this information. Are they constructing the foundation according to the site-specific plan? They're not using a manufacturer's generic. Is it designed to the IRC? And is it designed by the correct design professional? And again, the minimum of 3 inspections.
What do the site inspection forms look like? For all the industrialized housing and building, there are 3 different forms for each specific inspection. That is a pre-pour, set, and a final. For industrialized housing, there are also an inspection checklist that must be completed by the inspector. On this slide, there are 2 examples of the inspection reports that need to be completed by a council-approved inspector. The page on the left side of the slide is a set inspection report. This page requires the inspector to document key information about the house, such as installation address, the inspector's information, the house serial number, the Texas decal numbers, the design information, such as the design, wind speed. This information is very important due to the nature of the modular house. Texas is a huge state with many different design considerations depending on where the building is to be installed. Because the manufacturer doesn't always know exactly where the house is going to, it's extremely important that the inspector check to make sure the house is suitable for its locale. The inspectors should always check the plans, the res check, and the data plate. The items he should check for are the climate zone, the wind speed, exposure, applicable building codes, and snow load. The page on the right side of the slide is a corresponding checklist to the report page on the left. This is a set inspection checklist. And before we go any further, I want to point out a very important note on the top of the document. It states the following. These checklists are a guide to the minimum code compliance items for the inspection. This checklist is only a guide and does not necessarily constitute a complete list of items to be checked, nor may all checkpoints be applicable. I think this note speaks for itself without any further explanation. However, I believe it's very important to give it attention for obvious reasons. There are corresponding checklists for each site inspection with checkpoints pertinent to that inspection. There's also a violation page that must be used to document any violations cited and cleared during the inspections.
So, all in all, it's a logical process that moves a certified modular house from the manufacturer to the installation site to occupancy by the homeowner, with clear law, rule, and department procedures guiding the way and providing for sufficient oversight by regulatory bodies to ensure safe and durable homes for the good people of the great state of Texas. Here we boiled it down to 6 primary steps. The house is ready for shipment. The site-specific plans are created. All the local permitting zoning is obtained. The responsible party ensures all the work is done. The responsible parties ensure all the inspections take place and pass as is required, and the homeowner moves in. So that's pretty much it. This concludes Mark and I's presentation for today. We'll be handing it back over to Donna Lipke. She can finish the compliance staff report. Before we do that, I'd like to take a quick moment to thank the IHB team for assisting Mark and I in this presentation. It was a team effort, so thank you, Donna, Carmen, Catherine, Kelly. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for me?
Donna, thank you. Is it possible to have something maybe boiled down a little bit from this to have available to the consuming public as to what they can expect?
Actually, we've been talking about doing a little video to put on the website based on this presentation. It's just we're gonna be working on that. So it'd be just the slides, and there'd be audio explanation of the slides.
Yeah, I can imagine local building officials being interested in some of these items, and
We're also thinking about doing that with the certification presentation we gave the last meeting, so manufacturers know what to expect for certifications. So,
Council?
okay. Okay, before I get into projects for the IHB staff, I did want to say most questions for the IHB program come in through the IHB compliance division. If you go to the bottom of the main website for IHB, there's an email address for ihbtech@tdlr.texas.gov, and that comes directly to the IHB team. There's an 800 number that would go through customer service, and there's a 512 number that would come directly to us. Okay. This is a list of manufacturers certified since the last meeting. Since I sent this information in for your notebooks, I discovered there was another manufacturer that became certified. So M&I Electric here at the bottom was added to the list. They were certified on January 2nd. These are manufacturer certification inspections in process and upcoming inspections. I added the upcoming inspections after this information was put in your notebooks. So we have 2 scheduled for February, to begin in February. And just to go over some of the reasons why some of these manufacturers take longer to get certified than others. For one item is that the compliance control programs were not adequate during the initial inspection, so we need to see another unit under construction before we can sign off on everything. Another item is the first unit is too far along to fully witness some areas of construction and compliance control procedures in full. So oftentimes manufacturers begin construction prior to the start of the inspection. There are instances where a manufacturer discovers that they need a certification label on the building, and they've already started construction. Unfortunately, they don't stop the construction while they go through the process of getting their plans approved and scheduling an inspection with us. So this often requires the building to be opened up so that we can inspect and ensure that the building meets the approved plans and mandatory building codes. When this happens, we don't really have an opportunity to see their compliance control programs in action, and so we will usually continue the inspection to the next unit that they construct for Texas. Third reason is because they have revisions to the compliance control manual and they haven't completed those yet. Sometimes there are problems with the approved procedures. For example, the manufacturer's actual procedures may be different than the approved, or the procedures are not ensuring code compliance in the buildings that they're constructing. The manufacturers may have already received certification labels for the building inspected during the inspection, as the rules and procedures allow us to release decals before manufacturer is certified if the building complies with the approved plans and mandatory building codes. However, the manufacturer may not have addressed problems with their compliance control procedures yet. And the next item is follow-up may be required after those compliance control manual revisions are completed. And of course, in some cases, the certification units that we are inspecting are still under construction. And last, we may be waiting for the manufacturer to pay the fees associated with the inspection. Anybody have any questions?
Counsel?
I've got
Thank
more,
you.
but I've got more.
Yes, ma'am. Keep going.
Okay, the trends and statistics of the IGP program. So this chart, this gives information reported here is current through October 2017, with the exception that the number of modular components reported, those numbers are current through November 2017. As can be seen from the chart, the number of modular components constructed under the IGP program is on the rise. These components include bathroom modules, jail cells, sink walls, even some modular plenums. As of October 2017, the total numbers of modular housing and building units constructed is down based on the past years. I figured about 214 units per month for September and October. If that trend continues, it will not be the same number of units that were completed in the last fiscal year. As you can see, the modular components, however, are on the rise, with 376 components for this year already, compared to 508 for the entire last fiscal year.
Donna?
Yes.
Help me again, just a quick description of modular components and how the industry is using them.
Well, modular components, sometimes they're just a bathroom that's installed in another building. Most of those, both bathroom units we see are for hospitals and clinics and things like that. Jail cells are another one we're seeing a lot of right now. And then we have some manufacturers that do what we call, that are called sink walls, where it's a wall that has a sink in it that's part of the what's installed in a hospital room, but it's just a portion of it. And I think this manufacturer is also doing some corridors for hospital buildings.
Have any of these modular component manufacturers provided you any feedback, or if I may, pushback on, guys, this doesn't fall within your program? There's, if it's a jail cell, then there's so many other components involved with maximum security systems and
Well, the rest of the site stuff, it would be in accordance with the inspections completed on site. Usually those are within a municipality, or there's some jurisdiction that has authority over inspections, and everything else is site-specific. For the jails, all we're actually seeing are the actual jail cells themselves. So it's getting more and more. We're seeing a lot of different uses out there, a lot of different things. New things keep coming up every day, it seems like. People want to do things in a different way. So we're trying to come up with ways to handle some of those new things. We'll, not today, but in the rules that we've been working on, we will be looking at some other ways for certifications also, but right now, that's not in the set of rules you'll be seeing today.
for next meeting, if it's possible, I'd like to get a very brief presentation of any of these, either 508 projects for modular components that were installed in 2017, or any of the current 376 projects in this fiscal year. I mean, I'm trying to picture how a component is used in the field and does not trigger quite a bit more effort that could potentially fall beyond an IHB program. In other words, if you are adding a room to an existing building and you're punching a hole through a wall, where does the IHB program?
These are all new construction projects, so they're building a frame and then they're putting these into that frame. They're leaving the spot for the place for that jail cell goes into place is there in the frame, and I'm not exactly sure how it's installed into the frame. We'd have to talk to the manufacturers and the builders about that.
That's why I think it'd be helpful for us to understand how these modular components are being used. If it's strictly for new construction and it's all happening concurrently, or if it's somebody's been found to be out of compliance. An existing facility is found to either be out of compliance or has run into some sort of failure of their current infrastructure, and they need to bring in a potty, and we're not going to bring in porta potties, we're bringing in one of these things.
So far, all we've seen has been new construction. We haven't had anything that's a change to an existing building. That I'm pretty sure of. I can check more into it, but I'm pretty sure of that.
If it's new construction on this modular components, why do we refer to it as modular components? Why is it not just part of the
Because there's
manufacturing?
items that can't be in. What do you mean? As far as well, usually they're non-structural. Number one.
What's that?
They're usually non-structural components. So they're not actually a bearing. There's usually not bearing walls involved. Well, like in the case of the jail cells, the bearing walls might be the walls of the cell. The ceiling is the only thing bearing on that jail cell, of the specific jail cell. The rest of the building is constructed to bear the loads of the building.
Sure. I think, I mean, not to drag it on, but it's interesting to me, and I'd appreciate it if at all possible, somebody showing a couple of snapshots of what this is and still how we are implementing the modular component construction, both from a manufacturing site, which I'm assuming is happening at a different manufacturing site than the overall larger manufacturing of the
Well,
building.
these are going into site constructed projects. So the jail cells are going into a building that's constructed on site.
Yeah.
So
So, Mr. Chairman, Carla James, TDLR, we'll be happy to put something together for
that'd be
you.
great. Thank you.
I can answer a little bit since I'm one that usually inspects
Go ahead, Mark.
these. A good example would be like for Holiday Inn Express or the La Quintas. As you come in, you'll see the bathroom units. They're all identical, and they'll have their mirror counterparts on the other side of the hallway. Those are all made in a factory setting, and they are brought out as individual units for each room. The reason they're made in a factory setting because what happens with plumbing, especially with a bathroom situation, that chews up about 23 to 32% of your time waiting for plumbing to happen in the field with your construction. If this is done in a controlled setting where it becomes a modular pod unit, only 3 connection points are needed in the field to set it up, and it's already been approved and tested for use. So they'll bring those in as they're putting in the floors and install the bathroom pod as they go from room to room. And that saves time for the general contractor, knowing that they already have a valid and tested unit that's in there. As far as the jail cells go, what they are, they're mostly the ones we have. The majority of are steel cells. They are fabricated, believe it or not, the one I went and certified in Colorado at the Colorado Correctional Facility. We have prisoners making prison cells for other prisoners in other states. So Those are already made. They're going into a new facility where all it is interior holding cells. They're not load-bearing to the outside. They have openings where they are conditioned by a central air and cooling and heating systems. So they're set up on the same principle as those bathroom pods. They're just plugged in, and they're ready to go, and all they have to do on site is attach the doors and give the security keys, which is required by the state judicial systems for them to control the keys.
Mark, thank you.
Okay, this just shows the total number of units not shipped as of October 2017. These are units that have been reported as completed and labeled, but they're still at the manufacturing facility. Also, a number of inspections by third parties from fiscal year 2012 through 18. Right now, the number of facilities inspected is down a little bit, but the number of actual units inspected is up. So some of the manufacturers are constructing a bit more. So more units are being inspected at each facility. Okay. Builder audits, where am I? Okay, builder audits. These are builder audits that from 2009 through 2017 that have been completed. This table shows the number of builder audits conducted. We don't perform as many audits on the commercial side as the residential side for the following reasons. First, there are very few consumer complaints on the commercial side of the Igp program, and generally those complaints concern unlicensed activity, not the construction or installation of the building. Also, installation inspections are not required for most commercial relocatable buildings installed outside the jurisdiction of a municipality. So unless the buildings are classrooms or church buildings, they don't have to have a site inspection under the IHB rules. Decal sales, the revenue from decal sales. So data for fiscal year 18 is through December 2017. There was a typo in your notebook. It said December 2018, so I fixed that. As can be seen from this chart, so far the total revenue for decal sales is up for fiscal year 2018 compared to fiscal year 2017. Right now it's about $22,733 per month in decal sales. So if this continues, the total revenue will be exceed what we had for 2017. And this is just a chart that depicts this is just a bar chart that depicts the information from the table. Same is true with the number of decals sold. The number of decals sold is up per month for fiscal year 18, and if that continues, we'll see an increase in decal sales for 2018. So I'm hoping that means that the actual number of units completed will also be going up, that the first quarter was just slow. So, and again, this is just a bar chart that depicts that information. Okay, what we haven't reported to you previously is Insignia Sales. This is just a chart showing the total revenue from Insignia Sales. As you can see, for fiscal year 2018, we've already exceeded the sales for fiscal year 17. Come on.
Donna, help me understand, what do we mean by Insignia Sales?
There's 3 types of certification labels. One is the decal. That goes on modular sections of a building. One is Insignia. That goes on components, so like the bathroom pods, the jail cells, that sort of thing. The other label is for alterations. And here again, total number of Insignia sold is also up for fiscal year 18. Last year we sold 631. This year, through December 31st, we're already at 422 Insignias. Yes?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask a question. Roland Brown, as far as the Insignia sales, on things that are not traditional 6-sided modules, if you will, bathroom pods, those jail cells, that type of thing. Relative to the Insignia Sales, how much impact has it had on those numbers? Is that part of the reason that 2018 is looking much better because there's an
No,
increase
that,
in those
that
areas?
chart only included the decals, the
Okay.
first chart, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Counsel? Please continue.
And that's all I have for the staff report.
Donna, thank you. Counsel, any questions? I think that completes item 4 of Agenda E, Compliance Division. So if we can move on to the Executive Office report.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, board members. I'm Nick Volinas, TDLR, going to give you our Executive Office report. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your service to Texas. Happy New Year. It's great to have you here. Want to start off, since we last met, the agency went through a real sad period. We lost one of our leaders, George Ferry, who was our compliance director, passed away in late October, and we miss him very much around here, and we've got a chair set aside for where he used to kind of hang out. 2017 was a busy year for the agency. It was a big year. We started off with the 85th session of the Texas Legislature, and we followed that up with a summer session. Started about the last time, a little after the last time you guys met here. But since then, our staff's been busy implementing legislation that was passed during the last 2 regular sessions. And what that entails is a process that includes all of our divisions. We call them bill implementation teams that have members from all across the agency involved in developing and reviewing rules, which we'll do here in the next agenda item with Molly, as well as communicating to stakeholders, appointing prepping advisory boards, hiring additional staff, and dealing with education exams, IT programs, and more. A majority of the work has been completed, but this is a process that will continue into the year as we implement programs this year and next. Over the last fall, our staff was busy doing what we could to help our licensees and small businesses along the Texas Gulf Coast recover from the devastation of Hurricane Harvey. We worked with the governor's office and Governor Abbott's Rebuild Texas program and efforts, and we're successful in implementing procedures to help all our eligible licensees in the affected areas to help them recover and return to work as quickly as possible. Our Harvey focus now is on the rebuild, and by protecting small business and consumers, avoid unlicensed activity and ensuring that they receive quality work for their hard-earned dollars. Information on this can be found on our website, tdlr.texas.gov, and the governor's Rebuild Texas site. 2018 is a non-legislative year, and therefore it's when we take on our statute-driven strategic planning exercise to prepare the agency and our programs for the next legislative session in 2019. We'll be going through that important process again this spring, and you'll be hearing more about that very, very, very soon. But back to our website for a minute. We refer to it as our window to the world. It's our chief communications tool to our keeping our stakeholders and the public up to date on what we're up to. And I wanted to share with you some recent web traffic numbers associated with this program. Your website over the past 6 months been fairly busy. Over the past 6 months, you've had 27,932 page views. That's an average of about 152 a day. And if you're interested in how visitors are accessing the site, 76% of them are coming from a desktop computer, while 19% are doing so from a smartphone and 5% from a tablet. The top 5 reasons for visiting your site, led by applications and forms, followed by registrant lists, laws and rules, frequently asked questions, and certification inspection program. So just wanted to mention that we're always looking at improving our websites and making them more user-friendly, more informative, fresher. And so if you have any feedback, please pass them along to us. And in addition to our websites, we invite you to keep up with TDLR activities and events through our social media accounts. That would be Facebook and Twitter. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them for you.
Thank you. And I'd like council to know, and I'd like to offer my appreciation to your staff during Hurricane Harvey. Within hours of getting up the following morning and seeing what was left, I had phone calls from TDLR letting me know what you had available to the public at large, letting me know that you guys were fully staffed, and if I knew of anybody who needed anything, your phones were ready, and the TDLR was absolutely staffed to be of assistance. So thank you. It was a difficult time for so many people along the coast of Texas,
people, right.
and we can appreciate what your staff was doing and hustling hard for our fellow Texans along the coast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Council, anything else? With that, then we conclude agenda item E, staff reports. Thank you to staff and everybody involved. We can move on to Donna, if you'll help us, and Doug, I think you were chairing a committee of our rules review effort, correct?
Correct.
So if I may, can I hand over agenda item F to Doug and then to staff? Thank you.
I think I'll let Donna
Item
speak
num-
initially.
Item number 1 really isn't out the work group, though. It's more about comments that were received during Phase 1 of the review process. And if
Okay.
you need a reminder of how that works, Molly can provide that. So, but-
I would, just a quick reminder.
And my name is Molly Fudel. I'm an Assistant General Counsel, and welcome. I look forward to working with you. Just to give you a brief overview of the 4-year rule review, we do it here at TDLR in 2 phases. Phase 1 has already been completed, and that is where we look at the rules as a whole and determine, do we need to continue with this, with these rules? And yes, we do, obviously. So they have been readopted. And then in Phase 2, we go deep down. We look at the comments we received from Phase 1. We look at those, and then we also take our own look at the rules and see what could be changed in order to be improved. Are there any provisions that are obsolete that we can get rid of? Things like that. And so the function of this work group is to take a look at the rules and see what changes need to be made. And I'm going to let Donna take the lead on telling you what changes she and the rest of us have come up with.
But the first item is the comments. We just wanted you to have a copy of the comments, and if you want to discuss the comments, we can. That's totally up to you. There's no action required for the first item.
Any highlights on these comments, and who are these comments from? in
The
general?
comments were from Oak Creek Homes and TMHA. My only highlights on it is most of the comments seem to have more to do with the enforcement process than our rules, which really, the enforcement process isn't addressed in our rules. It is addressed in the enabling statute and rules for the agency. And so that's more, should be more taken up with the commission and the executive office and enforcement, not this council necessarily.
And just to step in, those comments have been forwarded to the Enforcement Division and to all the relevant people who might find that information beneficial. But as for the 4-year rule review, we're really focusing on Chapter 70, and that's something a little bit different.
Give me a moment, Donna. Thank you.
Okay.
Molly, thank you. The association's comments talks about reexamining policies and fees and timing of approval and things of that nature. Does that fall within our rule review process, though?
They weren't very specific about what they meant by that.
Okay.
So, and as far as fees, that the agency does a fee review. How often is the fee review process?
Carla James, we're required to do it on an annual basis, and so we take a full look at that each year
Thank you, ma'am.
of all of our fees, not just IHB.
And it's been a while since the fees have changed. The last time there was a change, the fees actually went down some. So. Now, as far as approval procedures for industrialized builders, the only thing they have to do is register, fill out an application, certify that they know what the requirements are to be a builder, which is basically make sure they install their buildings in accordance with the law and the rules and the mandatory building codes, and get the inspections done. There's no other approval process for that. In addition, the department does not review and approve plans. Those are reviewed and approved by third parties.
The item where the association is asking the department to review its policies or its current complaint inspection and reporting process, does that fall within Rule 70?
No.
Okay.
Other than the consumer notice, which was not that long ago that was
Discussed here.
discussed, yeah.
And this discussion on the final on-site inspection report that the association is bringing concern, have we looked at that? I am on, it's difficult for me to tell here, it's not a dated or a page-numbered letter, but I am on the second page of TMHA's letter to the IHB staff, or to, who is it addressed to? Forgive me, to
General Counsel's office.
General Counsel's office.
Let's see.
The department, through its rule creation process following the 2013 passage of Senate Bill 672.
Okay, it says we created a new definition of final on-site inspection report. Yeah, we did define final on-site inspection report, but that's because that was not defined previously, but a final on-site inspection was already in the rules. We just defined what the report was in the new rule. So they also said that the law says everything it needs to say about inspections, but all the law really says is that there will be a site inspection. It doesn't say what a final inspection is. The procedures for those inspections are left up to the council.
Please, Mr. Childers, yes.
Randy Childers, have the association met with your staff? Honestly, this sounds like more of a item where y'all get in a room and you talk this through instead of a long letter when, I'm just thinking of my job in my city. This is something where we have a meeting, we sit down and we hash these one by one. And not that it doesn't need to be aired in open court, but it just seems like this is, some of these items, if it's regulatory, just the passage of Senate Bill 672, which you reference, it's passed by the legislature, obviously everybody knows that's law. It just seems like there probably should be some sort of meeting of stakeholders held to discuss this specifically and see if some of these items, some of these situations and that are described in this letter can just be worked out. And I guess there's a chance that some of them can. It seems like that would be an approach that could be taken to maybe help this along. Because there's a lot of information in this letter for us to try to, I'm not even sure what the council actually can really do. It sounds like more Department of Procedures, like SOPs, something other than.
Well, like I said, a lot of this has to do with enforcement requirements. Some of it may have to do with rules, but we would need more details on that.
I can appreciate that, and yet at the same time, I don't want to be overly dismissive of
No.
of this letter. And so,
I don't either.
how does staff suggest that we give the information in this letter some sense of due process that can bring both sides a little closer together? Is there something that we can facilitate between the Manufacturers Association members and staff?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Donna, Mary Winston, TDLR. As Molly was discussing before, as part of the rule review, this is phase 1, where the rules were posted for public comment. And these are the public comment, or comments.
Yes,
They are taken into consideration when we post rules, and as Mr. Childers has said, some things referenced are created by legislature, which are law. We cannot change the law. We just write rules to implement the law as created by the legislature. Nick was speaking earlier about our strategic planning that's coming up because this is a non-legislative year. How do we know where we're going in our different programs that we regulate? We have strategic planning. Part of it is to take information like this, literally travel around the state. We publicize that to the different places that we go, invite our licensees there to give us statements just such as this. So when we deliver our strategic plan, that we have the thoughts of our licensed body within the public within our strategic plan. So we don't dismiss this at all. We take it very seriously. Actually, this is very small compared to some of our programs. We have reams of paper for different programs, and we go through everyone, each and every one. Molly kind of looked out a little bit with this one because it's a little small, but we definitely take it in consideration. This is phase 1 of this public comment. They're allowed to voice their concerns, and we listen, and we make this part of our process.
Mary, thank you. So just in consideration of the members for the TMHA, what would be the next step for them to communicate these comments to the IHB program and to the TDLR? When and where?
They've already done it, essentially. Yeah, this is it. And it came to General Counsel's Office Compliance, and it has been forwarded to enforcement, and I know that they've seen it as well. I'd also like to point out, I think that one of the things that either TMHA or possibly the other commenter brought up was the length of time it was taking for these enforcement cases to progress. And I understand from talking from staff, those times have actually gone down, and part of that is due to the hiring of a new staff member, Brian Ledbetter, and his efforts on that. And it might take a little bit of time to see those results progress.
And Molly, I appreciate that. I don't think this entire letter is strictly on enforcement. Some of it has to do with oversight and enforcement of the rules, not necessarily taking it into enforcement, but just working with the requirements set up by our rules and enacted by our compliance staff. So I don't want to beat this up anymore, but I just want to make sure that I will continue to encourage the public, the consumers, and the manufacturers to approach this board to make information like this a little bit more available to council members. And I definitely appreciate that this went to the TDLR council, but this is the information that I think needs to be brought to bear so we can offer and facilitate a discussion between staff and manufacturers, because ultimately we're here to facilitate the growth of an industry, and we're here to make products better and more available to the consumers. And so I'm not sure I'm getting the response I'm trying to elicit from staff on this.
Well, the work group was looking at the letters also, but we will, the rules that are brought to the council, everybody will have a chance to comment on the specific rules also as they're.
And that's what I'm
Yeah.
questioning right now. So
Right now, their comments are really too general to, I think maybe when we have more specific rules, then they need to make comments on those.
and when will that? Go ahead, Molly.
Sure, thank you, Molly Fudel. So we are just at the very beginning stages of Phase 2 of the rule review. We haven't met as many times as I think we're going to, nor have we come up with a complete set of rule amendments that we think are appropriate. So we will continue to keep these comments in our mind. I'll tell you that from my perspective, when I read these, although the majority of comments relate to the enforcement process, what I hear loud and clear is licensees want to be able to engage in their profession and do what they do with a minimal regulatory burden as possible. And from the TDLR perspective, that's what we want as well. We want to ensure health and safety while imposing the minimum amount of time and effort in terms of regulatory costs to our licensees. And we keep that in mind every time we look at the rules.
Mr. Chairman, Carla James.
Yes, ma'am.
Have we addressed your questions? Because I kind of feel like we're taking it from multiple angles. I'm not sure if we really addressed your question or concern.
I believe I got a little bit more clarification, Mr. Robinson.
I just wanted to add that as far as the work group, and Donna alluded to this, but Molly may have sent the letter out to enforcement before we had a conversation on it, but we picked up that there was a lot of enforcement detail in the work group. We've taken the parts that we can address within the rule group, and so the 4 members on the work group, plus much more, a larger quantity of staff, have gone through these letters in detail from our perspective, and will affect what we can with regard to the rules. And that's, again, as far as this part of the agenda, we're looking at the rules, we're not looking at enforcement. So there may be other opportunities for public comments on other parts of enforcement or changing program. We even saw in some of, or going through these 2 letters, that some of this may require a legislative change in 19 by whoever's interested in making that change. But so there's a wide range of ways that these 2 letters can be addressed in their completeness, and we're going to take what we can for the rules. We've done that. Enforcement's obviously looking at what they can do. So being addressed, at least from our perspective, for the rules, that some of this is not specific to the provisions of Chapter 70.
Mr. Robinson, thank you. Thank you.
And for clarification, Mary Winston, the members of the work group on the council are, you are a member, Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
And
It's
Mr. Scott
Doug Robinson, Dub Smith, Roland Brown, and Scott McDonald.
Thank you.
Donna, thank you. Please continue.
Okay. The next item is F2, report from the work group on rule review process and discussion regarding possible amendments to Chapter 70 rules. Doug, do you want to address this?
Doug Robinson. As far as the work group, I just want to paint a picture that the overwhelming work of what feeds into the work group is from staff. Staff deals with the program every day. They deal with manufacturers, the registrants, builders, on both sides, commercial and residential. And in doing so, they apply the rule book. They apply, our rules, our codes, per se, every day. And so over the last number of years, certainly since last meetings where we may have made it a critical change here and there, Donna and staff have been able to say to the work group, it's going to work much better if we collect all this information over in this chapter. Or if we change this definition. We certainly need to add a definition of closed construction or a modular building versus a mobile building. And so just from their experience, they brought to the work group a large amount of information that on not June 23rd, but December 7th, we went through in great detail. There is more work to be done, but it's not going to be a major change to the rules, but it's certainly going to be made, in my estimation, more user-friendly. And so we have completed, certainly with Donna and staff's assistance, completed a first pass. And from that meeting and comments and input, we have gone back with other changes that need to be made. We will schedule another meeting and continue with the rule change, or the rule change process, to where we can bring that back to council and suggest change to the rules to be voted upon.
And as he said, this is just a first draft. I expect, though, as we go through this, we'll be in this section of the rules and think, oh, well, that affects a rule we've already looked at. We need to look at that again. So,
And this summary starts on page 35 of our packet?
yes. And if you want, I can go through a summarization of what we've looked at so far.
And
There's no action necessary today. This is just keeping you informed about what we're doing. If you saw something specific in here that you want to discuss, we can discuss that also.
Donna, please, and council, please feel free to engage as you see items being brought up that you need clarification on or would like to provide input on. Please.
Okay. So, started with Rule 7010, which is definitions. We've added a definition of certification label to include decals, insignias, and alteration decals. There's a definition of all those labels in there already, but we wanted to be able to use that term in the rules to refer to all types of labels. We revised the definition of commercial structure to remove the word industrialized in front of building. There's a legal reason for that, and I forget what it was. Molly, do you? Because we were defining something, but we're using industrialized in the definition of what we're defining. So that's just a simple change, taking that word out. We did the same thing for industrialized housing. We revised the definition of design package to clarify that a little bit better. We added a definition of integration. We'll have more to come on that. This has to do more with our manufacturers that do equipment buildings and the processes we're seeing out there, the way they do things. So there may be some changes to the way the program works based on that. We added a definition of model or project-specific plans and calculations, which is a term used in the revisions to Section 7070. We added the definition of modular unit, which is a term that we often use, but people don't seem to understand. So we're trying to clarify what we mean by that when we say that word. We added a definition of ordinary repairs. We moved that from 7074 since if we're going to define something, we feel it should be in the definitions. We added a definition of recertification. Again, that was moved from 7074. We added a definition of relocatable building, so we don't have to keep saying a building designed to be moved from one commercial site to another commercial site. We added a definition of typical details and calculation package as another term used in the revisions to 7070. We added a new paragraph for abbreviations and moved all abbreviations from paragraph A to paragraph B. Existing paragraph B is now paragraph C. We borrowed some language from the IBC in that paragraph. Only a portion of the paragraph is new. Existing paragraph C is now paragraph D, and a portion of the paragraph moved to new paragraph E. In 7050, we added record retention to the title of the rule, since this rule also covers record-keeping requirements for registrants. There's a new G and H, which was moved from the record retention requirements for alterations and recertifications from Rule 7074. 7070 has the most changes. In fact, we are going to be suggesting that we just repeal that rule and adopt a new rule in its place. So Part A is about the selection of a DRA by a manufacturer, an REF builder, or an industrialized builder, or alteration permit holder. Previously, this information was spread between 2 or more rule sections, so we're consolidating it in one section. Part B is now about the distribution of the approved documents by the DRA to the manufacturer, the REF builder, and the industrialized builder or alteration permit holder. This section also includes retention requirements for these documents. Part C is new. This paragraph contains the most revisions to the rule. The current rule requires the DRA to submit a copy of every approved document to the department. The DRA will still submit a full copy of all QC manuals to the department. However, now the DRA will only submit cover pages, table of content pages, and revision logs for most documents to the department unless we request a full copy for the approved documents. There will be specific information required on the cover pages of the approved plans. Most of this information comes from the current rule found in 7070B18. Part D is now Part
D is currently Part B.
Yeah, in the current rule it's Part B. I don't like the way I worded that. I think I need to reword that. This hasn't changed much from the current rule except for the requirements for energy compliance details. Part E was Part C in the current rule. This has been rewritten to better clarify what we are looking for in the manufacturer's compliance control manual. Part F is Part D in the current rule. This hasn't changed much from the current rule, with the exception that item number 1 has been clarified to include that the manufacturer needs to include not just the load locations, but the actual loads that are placed on a foundation from the building. And a new item has been added requiring system testing requirements that will require testing during installation. Part G is Part F in the current rule. No changes are currently proposed. Part H is Part E in the current rule. No changes are currently proposed. Part I is specific documentation for requirements for construction documents for alterations of industrialized housing and buildings. Industrialized housing and permanent industrialized buildings. This was previously part of 7074. 7074 has to do with alterations and recertifications. Part J is specific documentation requirements for construction documents for alteration and recertification of relocatable industrialized buildings. This was previously part of 7074. As I indicated in 7010, we also added definition of relocatable industrialized buildings to the definitions. Okay, responsibilities of registrants, 70.71 data plates. This has been revised to include data plates for alterations and recertifications. We moved that from 7074. Again, this is where we're consolidating the rules, so like information is in the same rule. We removed the exception that allows a data plate to be attached to the cover of the electrical panel box. This has more to do with the fact that every time somebody's looking for a label on a relocatable building, a lot of times it was on the panel box cover, and that's been lost or misplaced or replaced or something else, so we decided to take that out of there. That's up to the council, though. We added the design water pressure to the data plate. We revised load requirements to reflect the load requirements of the IBC. And for buildings designed to the IRC, we revised that so instead of an occupancy group, the use of the building is shown, such as single-family house or duplex. 7074, there are extensive changes to this rule. Again, because of this, the plan is to repeal the existing rule and replace with the new rule. Paragraphs A and B did not change much. Paragraph C was removed when a definition of ordinary repairs was added to the definitions in 7010. The requirements in paragraph D was moved to the rule about certification labels. Paragraph E became paragraph C. Requirements for plan reviews, data plates, and labels were removed and added to applicable rule section under 7070 and 7071. Now covers responsibilities of industrialized builder with regards to construction and inspections for alterations and recertifications. Paragraph F became paragraph D. Again, recertification classifications were removed. Requirements for plan reviews, data plates, and labels were removed and added to applicable rule sections elsewhere. Now, this only covers responsibilities of industrialized builder with regards to construction inspection. Requirements of paragraph G was moved to the rule about data plates, and record-keeping requirements of this rule was added to 70, that should say 7050, not 7020. 70.77, responsibilities of the registrant's certification labels. The title of this section was revised to include all certification labels that may be issued under the IHB program. Previously, it only covered labels for new construction. Now it will cover labels for alterations and recertifications. Paragraph A is a description of the 3 different types of certification labels. Paragraph B is how to obtain the labels. Requirements for obtaining alteration labels was moved here from 7074. Paragraph C is where labels may be attached to the modular unit. Paragraph D is about control of the labels, and the control of the labels that the control of the labels remains with the department. We added requirements for removing and returning labels from damaged or destroyed modular units. Paragraph E is about the responsibilities of the registrants with regard to the labels. Those are general responsibilities. Paragraph F is specific to manufacturers. We also added a section about converting a modular house to a HUD code manufactured house, as this has come up several times in the past. Paragraph G is responsibility specific to REF builders. Paragraph H is responsibility specific to industrialized builders or alteration permit holders in regard to alteration labels. And paragraph I concerns the purchase or replacement labels for modular units where the label was damaged, destroyed, or otherwise lost. 70.102 revised the title of the section from use and construction of codes to application of mandatory building codes. We removed language from recertification requirements about recertification classes, since we simplified that in 7074. 70.103 has to do with alternate materials and methods. We added the International Accreditation Forum and the Pacific Accreditation Cooperation as acceptable to accredit product certification agencies, in addition to those that were already listed in the rule. These are organizations that are part of the same signatories for this international group, that the International
Code Councils.
Well, yeah, it's the IAS, International Accreditation Service, which is part of ICC. They're all part of the signatories to the same document. So now, if you have, we can go into the specifics of the rules if you want. Like I said, this is mostly for information purposes at this point, so you have the rules. So if you see something in there that you want us to look at closer or you want to address, we can. You can send me an email on that, for that matter, or if you have something right now, you can bring it to our attention.
Okay. Counsel, if I may, Mr. Robinson, is there something that you recall that your group focused on, or a particular discussion that you want to bring to bear to the council and for us to be aware of, or continue in discussion, or just you guys keep your nose down and keep at it until you're ready to present the rule changes?
Well, again, big thanks to Donna and staff for their insight, really, into what's going to make the rules better and more user-friendly. I think the reorganization of the sections and like getting everything for alteration recertification back into one place, as we've added to the different sections over time, we've taken on recertification, alteration of units. And when we added those rules, they were added to different sections. So if I was to characterize this rule change, it would be to clean everything up and put things in their appropriate box. Now that we've come down the road, we've added a bunch of stuff and REFs and relocatable educational facilities and alterations, recertifications, et cetera. And now this is a good cleanup, good reorganization.
I certainly appreciate concentrating all the acronyms in one place where we can go see what they are. That's truly appreciated.
And definitions, like Donna said, sometimes people don't know what an industrialized building is, what a true definition of a modular building is, or a mobile building. Certainly on the commercial side, people may be more familiar with terminology on the residential side, but just trying to make it more user-friendly as well.
Okay.
Certainly, if we're sitting up here and we have a question on what something is, like the components, it can be better defined
By this
in our
rule
rules.
assembly? Okay.
In fact, once you began to talk about that, really, a component is anything with closed construction that can't be inspected on site. So I could frame a wall, sheathe at two sides, have one run of electric in it, and that electric would need to be inspected, could get a component insignia,
Correct.
and then it could go be used in a new construction, structural or non-structural. But those are the kind of things that we can make more defined user-friendly, so we'll take a look at that as well. We were going through that, I was thinking about definitions and rules as well.
Counsel? Donna, thank you. In terms of item 2, report from the work group, is there any action item we need to take, or
No, there's no action needed. We just wanted to keep you up to date about what's going on.
what is the, if I may, back to Mr. Robinson, and absolutely counting on Donna here, what is the next step for this work group?
To continue on with changes to the rules, I've already started some, but like I said, it can be a
Slow process.
slow process, yeah. And like I said, sometimes I work on a rule, come up with something, and then I go work on another rule and think, oh, well, this needs to be over
Sure.
in this rule we already looked at. And
Schedule for moving forward, when can we either expect the next update or the
I'm hoping to have more than one meeting between this meeting and the last, so more work group meetings. There was a lot of things going on, and then we came into the holiday period, and it just kind of hard to get the work group together. So we'll hopefully have more work group meetings, maybe 3 or 4 between now and the next meeting, so we can look at more rules.
Okay. Did you get, if I may ask, did we have good participation from our 3 council members in the, not
Yes.
asking anybody to tattletale, I just need to know if we need to
It was-
augment the work group.
It was good, and if you're in the room and you're on staff and you attended the call as well, will you raise your hand? We had good participation from staff. There was more than that on the call, but we definitely had good staff from process and legal and enforcement, and Donna with recommendations. So it was definitely productive, and we do need to meet.
More than once.
Yeah, more than once, but definitely a couple more times just to refine the changes that are being made.
And to look at other changes that need to be made. Some changes need to be made because, like, the registration requirements are not quite the way they need to be for, like, when a ownership of a company changes. So, things like that.
Council, anything further?
I'd just like to thank Doug and Roland and members of the staff that participated in it. Obviously, a lot of work has gone into this, and I hope it results in what you characterized it earlier as more user-friendly and clearer for the users. So thank you for your time.
And like I said, you have these ones we've worked on. If you have a chance, look at them. Have any comments, let us know.
Donna, thank you. Moving on to item 3, discussion and possible action regarding electronic storage needs of the IHB program and potential ways to address those needs, including adjustments to fees and 16 TIC 70.80.
Okay. This came about, again, because of the work group meeting. A lot of the changes in section 70.70 have to do with the submittal requirements for approved plans. Right now, all those come to us, and it's created some storage problems for us. So that's one of the reasons we're doing the major rewrite to that rule. An FTP server has been discussed, and it came up in meeting that maybe there could be a fee for that, a user fee for the FTP service, but David Gonzalez is going to explain how that process works and how we determine what's going to go forward for the agency.
David Gonzalez, Compliance Division. Usually Donna is my lifeline, so on this particular matter, I happen to have just a little bit more information on the IT Governance Committee and how our agency prioritizes our technical decisions on IT type things like an FTP server. As you can imagine, making decisions for a program on how we're going to process design review agency plans and submittals, it's a pretty significant change. And when we have so many other programs that may have similar requirements for reviews and inspections, making a decision piecemeal or wholesale decision, pretty significant. The input from this work group was intended, and I think definitely helpful on how other entities take care of this. Mr. McDonald was also participating in this one, and he actually gave us some insight on how fees can sometimes come into the mix. The item actually says discussion, possible action, and maybe addressing adjustment to fees. I think it's a little bit premature at this time to start talking fees, especially since usually we're trying to lower fees, not add new ones. I think with the IT Governance Committee, this is on their radar. I think y'all have already heard in Nick's report, we've been a victim of our own success. We've got programs that have come to us all at one time with deadlines, statutory deadlines for implementation that have kind of jumped the hoop or jumped the queue in line to get prioritization. But our IT Governance Committee knows that we want to do this. This is actually would make a significant improvement to our process if we can move forward with it. And so it's I think it's really left to us after the work group's input and our agency to see how we can prioritize it and get it done. You need to add anything? Mr. Brown, I think you were part of that work group. And
A question, though. Basically, through TDL&R, the IT Governance Committee and how it relates to our group, and if we had to find funds to get something additional for the department, how would that be structured? How would that be brought to this group to say, we need to come up with something to find the funds to put this into place? Because I have a great concern. I see our industry is evolving, and we see some things that Donna was talking about today about the restroom pods and certain things, and being part of the overall industry, which Doug and I am through the Modular Building Institute. We're seeing a whole lot of new ideas coming in out there, which will eventually affect Texas. And so I see this as an important time in which we're restructuring some things. So however we lay the foundation, it's going to have to be able to grow. It's going to become more complex, not less complex. Back to my point, where does the money come from? And then what does this group have to be prepared to do from a financial standpoint to assist? What kind of decisions will have to be made?
I can speak to some of that.
David, if I may.
Sure.
Carla James, TDLR. So, excuse me, TDLR, like all state agencies, go through the appropriations process, and will embark on that process during 18 in preparation for the legislative session in 19. Certainly, the input from this council is important to us, as the input from all of our advisory boards are, and that'll be taken into consideration as we request funding for the 20 and 21 biennium. I'm not certain that there's a lot that the individual members would do to provide funding to the agency. We will take your input in, and certainly as private citizens, you're welcome to talk to your legislators, but it's a combination package that's submitted by the agency. And the strategic planning process will assist us with that as well. As David stated, we are the recipient of a number of new programs, I believe 15 in the last 2 years. And so that has a draw on agency resources. And the incorporation of, almost 100,000 new licensees has caused us to have to look at what we're doing and prioritize accordingly, as David stated, to the statutory deadlines that are set forth for the agency. So I'm not certain I answered your question, but there is a distinct process that our agency goes through in requesting funding, and certainly I would be happy to visit with any of you to discuss that. I'm kind of a numbers person, so that's where my strengths lie.
Okay. That makes sense. You answered my question.
If I may, just a clarification on the issue. So because of the type of documentation that we require of all registrants, we just don't have the server space to,
Yeah, we don't have server space to receive electronic copies of approved plans. In the rules, we're trying to address some of that by making it so the DRAs maintain the permanent copy. They provide us like the cover pages so we know what's been approved. They provide us the QC manuals. I think we do have electronic space for those because those aren't huge documents. But other than that, the only times we're going to get hard copies of these documents would be if we have a complaint case or we need to look at something, somebody has a problem with the construction process for a particular manufacturer, or if we're doing a certification inspection. And those would be convenience copies, and we would only retain those as long as we had them. So that's how we're addressing it right now in the proposed rules. Right now, the current rules require the DRAs, the design review agencies, to submit a copy of every approved document to us. That's the plans, specifications, calculations, everything.
how, do the rules identify how long the IHB group needs to hold on to this information?
Yes, we hold on to the information until the next code cycle, until we adopt the next set of the newer mandatory building codes. So, in other words, when we adopted the 2015 codes, we got rid of everything that was approved to the 2009 codes.
Thank you.
Randy Childers, I don't think, and Mark can, I know, I'm not surprised to hear that the FTP and more fees came from Scott, because that sounds like something he would say. But I think all cities, we're in the same situation. Builders, developers want to submit plans electronically, but cities only, or just like TDLR, have only so much space. I hear there's this thing out there called the cloud, but still not really sure how that works that well. So sometimes we've got an FTP. I know a lot of cities do it, but at some point it's sometimes there's have to be fee increases. Because it's not an inexpensive task when you're talking to IT folks.
And Mr. Childers, this is David Gonzalez. Do you mind putting it on the record? How much do y'all charge for y'all's FTP server? Is it per submittal?
Yes, I think it is. I mean, if I could get you the exact amount, that's not my area.
Just
I
curious.
just, like I said, I just heard of the cloud, and so I just hear that that's out there too, so.
Donna, thank you. Counsel, anything further? So the agenda item notes discussion possible action, but at this point, I'm understanding we're not being asked for any specific action unless,
No.
It really should have been just discussion.
okay. Okay. Is there anything else, counsel? Staff, thank you. Can we move to item G, discussion possible action regarding approval of third-party inspectors, third-party inspection agencies, and design review agencies?
So currently, since the last meeting, there's only been one new third-party inspector that has applied for approval. He's reached interim approval. On page 84 in your documents, you'll see the chart showing who the new inspector is, and I'm not sure I can pronounce his last name, so I really don't know how to pronounce that name, sorry. So it shows what he has the required experience, he has the required ICC certifications, he has the energy certifications. So really, all we need now is a approval from the council of IHI-212.
And in particular, just want to hear it out loud, staff recommends approval.
Staff recommends approval.
Council, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
We've got a motion to approve acceptance of the
That was Doug, right?
Yes.
That did it? Okay. I wasn't looking at the time.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve the third-party inspector. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, moving on.
Mr. Chairman, could we get who identified as first and
I've-
second on the motion?
I've got it.
For
You've
you.
got it all?
But it
Yeah.
was Mr. Doug Robinson and Mr.
Steve
Steve Fitzpatrick as the second.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Donna, anything further on agenda item G?
No.
Okay, then if we may, let's move on to agenda item H. And in terms of that, agenda item I is public comments. And what I'd like to do is just try to make sure we've got a sense of order and discussion to this approach. So help me, Donna, what kind of information does staff have for item H, or should we combine H and I together?
I would prefer that we would go ahead and talk about H, because then that might inform how the public forms their comments.
Okay. And, yeah, excuse me, Molly and Donna, just to make a little inventory here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, no, 6 public comment forms that have been filled out. We are definitely here to be of service to the state of Texas, its citizens, and the public that is present. I've got all night. I just want to know, do we have any limitations on the side of council and staff?
Carla James, TDLR. Generally speaking, Mr. Chairman and Council, we limit the testimony to 3 minutes. And you all, of course, can decide otherwise, but that's what we see in most of our advisory board meetings and our commission meetings.
And would you like me to go over the background on this first?
In just one moment, I'm
Okay.
just trying to get a couple of, rules of engagement here out of the way, and we're off and running.
The other thing I wanted to bring up, is there anybody that's going to have to leave at some point?
That's what I'm at.
Yeah.
That's where I am right
So,
now.
because we might have to have the election.
Yeah, that's exactly where I am right now, and so I've got all night. It's, I'm offering it up front, but council members, is there anybody who's pressed for time? It is currently 3:20, and I don't intend to be here.
All night would be probably a problem for me. I think.
Yes. But if,
Generally speaking, and the other thing I would suggest to Chair, and like some of the meetings that Ms. James is talking about, if everybody obviously needs the opportunity to speak, but if everybody is going to say the same thing, maybe there's a couple people that take the lead and come and discuss at the same time. And I'm not sure that everybody has the same thing to say, but I'm not sure everybody has 6 different things to say, either just for time. But everybody obviously deserves the chance to speak. There's no question about that, and they deserve the chance to speak. But I don't know, I'm thinking of code hearings and Me Too's and Me Too and Me Too. That's just gonna drag us and just slow it down even more.
well, everybody who submitted a public comment form is absolutely welcome to speak, and we will be mindful of a 3-minute limitation, but absolutely open to and cordial to offering more time as we see the relevancy of the discussion. With that being said, I don't think council is running off to an airplane or any other tight schedule, but let's try to move it forward. Donna,
Okay.
if you'll kick us off, please.
Okay, the purpose of this agenda item is a discussion of comments received from the Texas Manufactured Housing Association regarding the impact of the adoption of the 2015 International Energy Conservation Code. The council has received a letter from TMHA requesting that the council hear and determine the course they want to plot for the future regulation of the industrialized housing industry with regards to implementation of the 2015 IECC. TMHA believes that a consideration and discussion as to the cost benefits of certain requirements, consumer break-even, and possible alternative methods or requirements to achieve energy efficiency benefits for the consumer should be discussed. The council does not have the authority to amend the 2015 IECC, as these codes were adopted by the state legislature and the State Energy Conservation Office for all new construction in the state of Texas, not just for modular construction. Amendments would require approval from SECO, and actually they require the Texas Energy Laboratory to review them and determine that we are not lessening the requirements of the code. So basically, the council cannot just amend the code themselves. We can, if somebody has specific amendments, we can send them to we can consider those and send them to the Energy Laboratory for their review and determination if this is lessening the requirements of the 2015 IEC. The Code Work Group, this is just a background, the Code Work Group consisting of 3 council members and 2 industry representatives recommended adoption of the 2015 International Codes, including the 2015 IEC, to the council at their meeting of August 22nd, 2016. The Code Work Group made the recommendation to adopt the 2015 International Codes due in large part to the adoption of Chapter 11 of the 2015 International Residential Code. Chapter 11 was the Energy Code chapter for all new 1- and 2-family housing construction by the legislature, and adoption of the 2015 IECC by SECO, which is the State Energy Conservation Office, for all other new construction in Texas. The effective date of adoption of these items was September 1st, 2016 for the residential side. The effective date of adoption for the commercial side was November 1st, 2016. The proposal to adopt these codes with amendments approved by the council was posted in the Texas Register on November 8th, 2016. Notifications of the proposal were sent out and were also posted on the IHP website. No comments related to the adoption of the codes or the amendments were received on the proposed changes, and the Texas Commission of Licensing and Regulation approved the rules on January 27th, 2017, with an effective date of adoption of August 1st. The 180-day notification about the adoption of the new code additions by the Commission was sent out to the public on January 31st, 2017. The website was also updated with information about the changes, and we also notified the DRAs directly, the design review agents directly, about the changes around this date so they could pass that information on to the manufacturers. And I guess I will leave it at that.
Donna, thank you. Council, does anybody have any questions or need any context as to why perhaps we're here or what this current discussion is about? Council, thank you. With that, I'd like to open it up to public comments. Staff has given me 6 forms for individuals within the room that have asked for time to speak to the council. Please, if I may, just ask for your patience and understand we're going to try our best to give you the time you need to discuss your concerns in front of us, and I'll do my best to just nudge you towards the understanding that we're approaching the 3 minutes if you need that. Staff has, as always, been very diligent and handed this to me in alphabetical form or order, and so thank you. First being Mr. Keith Alexander. If I may, sir, would you please state your name and who you represent, or if you're representing yourself, just your address?
Yes, my name is Keith Alexander. I'm general manager of Palm Harbor Homes here in Austin, so I'm representing Palm Harbor Homes, Austin.
Thank you.
I appreciate the time of the council and TDLR. What I'm here to do is just express the impact on my plant and our industry from the adoption of the IECC 2015, and in particular the field testing portion of it, which is a significantly impactful portion of it based on the variances of our industry and the fact that a home is built in one place, transported and set up in various pieces out in the field outside of the control of a manufacturer. Let me state that as As a law, I think the IECC is a good thing. We all want energy conservation. It delivers a good home to the consumer. Let me express the impact on what it has had, though. We're looking for a level playing field with all the different builders out there in the building residential homes. We feel that the current rule, the way it's written, does prevent that level playing field. Some municipalities, some jurisdictions are not requiring a test of the whole house air exchange blower door test, or a builder is testing one model and they're bypassing all models based on that test. Under the current rules, the way it's written, at each individual home and each location is tested separately after it's set up. That is significantly different than the residential builder is seeing across the state of Texas. A lot of jurisdictions aren't testing at all. The states surrounding the state of Texas have chosen not to implement that one particular section. Let me be clear, we are testing in the field for our duct integrity. We are being tested in the field for the duct integrity after it's all been set up as the whole house air exchange. What I'm specifically requesting is that we look at the climate zone 3 and the 3 air exchanges per hour requirement. I think that's significantly impacting the ability of my factory to offer consumers what they want. For example, a fireplace. I have absolutely denied every consumer requested a fireplace. I'm no longer providing fireplaces on any industrialized coated house that I build. As you can imagine, I build on the significantly higher end, and that is a very big dissatisfier. Let me tell you briefly the impact of what has happened. I'm running approximately 25% of my production volume. I build about 700 homes a year. About 25% of that is in the industrialized coated houses. All right? I am now running at a 10% of my production rate, and my sales backlog for the balance of the year is at 5.6%. 2 reasons for that. I have, absence any change to the rule, I am no longer accepting orders for climate zone 3s, which is all of West Texas, west of Travis County, basically, and everything north. The second reason is the efficiency, productivity, and cost changes to the units themselves. I had to raise the price of my houses approximately 8%. Still not a bad deal. I think consumers can see a result in the end over the lifespan of their home. But it's the issue in the field that is causing problems. Outside the control of the manufacturer, the industrialized builder is responsible for the setup. He's responsible for tying the units together per our requirements. It is there where the breakdown is occurring, if there is one, and it comes back to the manufacturers. My purpose is just to relate to you the impact that is happening on the residential side of construction within industrialized housing.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Next, Mr. Howard, forgive me, Broughton?
Howard Broughton.
Welcome, Mr. Broughton. If you would, please let us know who you represent, or if you're here individually, just state your address, please.
I represent Palm Harbor Homes out of the Fort Worth factory up in North Texas. I'm in charge of sales up there.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I want to speak to the same issue that Keith was just talking about the blower door test, but maybe from a little bit different angle. It's been difficult for us to build these. We, like Champion Homes, Clayton Homes, and Oak Creek, have a retail arm. The retail arm has sold houses in the field already, so when July happened, we had a backlog of houses that we had to build to the new code. We had to go through that backlog and tell them they couldn't get fireplaces. Now let me explain that real quick, what Keith touched on. The fireplace we use, because of the nature of the beast, we're not building on a slab. That fireplace sits on the floor, has 2 ducts out to the side that go underneath and pull fresh air in. The reason it does that is because when you close the doors on the front of the fireplace, you're not pulling air into the fireplace to run the fire in order that they pay money for to heat their home. Site Bill house you are. So we feel like we have a very efficient item. But in Texas, puppy dogs, cowboy hats, fireplaces, they want them. And so we had to call every customer that ordered them and said, we can't do that because it won't pass the blower door test. I shipped to the adjacent states. They don't have it. In fact, I know of no other state that has this one item. If they did, they purged it and said, we're not going to do that in IRC 2015. And so I'm able to ship to the other states, but I can't restrict and ship here. Once I build these houses that I've got in backlog, like Keith, we have suspended our modular business. Well, we just got word yesterday that there's a $100,000 gap between the site-built house average that's going up and what HUD is. You know what's in that gap? That's these houses, the modular coated homes. We're trying to do Harvey victims, we're trying to do floods, fires and things and lumber, and it's all gone up. And the more the prices go up, and they went up 5 times last year with us, but the more they go up, the more they pull the site build further away from where the HUD is, creating the larger gap, which is exactly where this product needs to be. I won't be in that business if I have to do the blower door test. Because things like Alpine, Texas last week, shipped a house out there, cost $695 to do the blower door test. He was very close to passing, but he has to go, the inspector. Now I got to go back and do another one because it didn't pass. I got to go figure out where it is. That uncertainty and another $695, in fact, we're glad he didn't call you guys for a complaint because he loves his house. It's the regulations he's got a problem with. So if we could do that one part of the regulation out, we would probably help us a lot. Now, we do things like put a gasket between the two halves where they go together. That's not a panacea. The house still didn't pass until we started doing other things. We do things like go out and buy this stuff by the case. It foams up 9 times bigger. It's a spray foam. Everybody knows polyurethane foam. Put it between the sections. Because we build in sections and ship a house out, it's not the same thing as building it piece by piece. There are some things we need to have consideration on. So I would ask you to consider, look at that one item. If you would forego that, even if you said do this, it would help us. That's why we're here today.
Thank you. Mr. Jack Cheney? Likewise, Mr. Cheney, if you'll let us know who you're representing, or if you're here individually, your
I'm
address.
Jack Cheney. I'm with Clayton Homes in Waco, Texas. And pretty much anything I have to say would be redundant what these gentlemen say. The only things that I would like to add to this, since August 1st of last year, when sales were up and modulars were really popping, it turns out that those houses we had sold, a lot of the retailers we had working with us that had installers putting these houses together said about those test failures that we incurred. So we spent a lot of time going out there and retesting. And those turned out to be a hidden cost that weren't in the bottom line of when we sold those homes. Since August the 1st, these houses have gone out. We've tested, retested, and we've had 5 or 6 that are passing right now that are out there in the field. There's no manufacturer out here that cannot build a home to a 2015 IRC requirements. On the other hand, on the 2015 IEEC, there's other things that are involved that actually affect what happens after it leaves our facility. Now, I can't go put my finger on it from pictures that have sent me or sent to me, and I can't place any blame. It may be a manufacturing defect, may be an installation error, and maybe the fact that they weren't aware what the requirements are. In the end, we've lost half of our retail sales outlets because they just do not want to deal with them anymore. So yes, it is affecting our production. And like Howard says, the gap is getting smaller between site-built and modular because it is affordable at this point, but you know, it's nature of the beast that if there's an increased cost to the manufacturer or to the retailer, it's going to end up in the hands and out of the pockets of those consumers. So that's basically all I had to add.
Thank you, sir. Next is Mr. Steve Nichols.
Steve Nichols, Champion Homes, Burleson, Texas. Yes, mirror the same sentiments that these guys have expressed. Absolutely the same condition. Houses in backlog, new rules effect. Consequently, we've got numerous houses. I've got one today. Today, we're out there on the third test trying to make this thing pass at exorbitant expense. Consequently, we're out of the business. Champion Burleson builds low-end, entry-level, what I like to call it, affordable housing. And as a result of the new rule, we haven't taken any orders for modular housing since that new August 1 deadline. So at the moment, at least, we're out of the business in the state of Texas in terms of modular housing. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Mr. Rob Walters.
Yes, my name's Rob Walters. I'm with Champion Homes in Athens, Texas. We're, Mr. Nichols said, he's with one of our other plants. We have 28 plants all over the world, but we build a high-end product also here, and we had been building an average of about 5 modular coated houses a month up until the new code went into effect. And now, because of, I agree with everything everybody else is saying, and we're doing just over 1 a month now as an average. We've installed 6 homes since the new code has gone into effect, and we've had retests on most of them because going down the road, it just as hard as we try to seal these things up, things shake loose and just going down the road. And when you get them together, some of the site installing issues, there's just issues that we can't control, and it just causes a lot of delays for the customer, and it makes for unhappy customers, and they don't we want a happy customer, and the testing is just making it very difficult to do that now. Okay.
Thank you.
Miss Annie Webster.
Hi, I'm Annie Webster, and I am a representative of Oak Creek Homes in Fort Worth. We are a HUD and modular IHB licensed manufacturer. And as of the new laws, we'd built 74 homes, modular homes in the state of Texas up until the end of July. Since then, we produced 2. So with that being said, most of Texas is Climate Zone 3. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Climate Zone 3 requires a 3 air change per hour, which is 3% leakage. It's almost unheard of. Even in the site builders are having a really hard time with it. But there's other climate zones that require 5 air changes per hour. Most of those we haven't had a hard time with, and those are the 2 that we were able to build. Based on, I'm going to touch on Donna's comments about ESL and SPEAR, which are the committees that I guess produce a study to enact the new codes. This is the one from ESL for Texas. They did it based on the 2015 codes and the 2009. Out of their prototypes, 97% passed at 2009. Less than 60% passed at 2015. And out of those, the average air change per hour was 7 air changes per hour. That's 3 versus 7. I mean, I think we could all agree that 7 is doable. We could do that. But the 3 is where we get into a lot of issues. So this is the study that's been done already, if y'all want to look at it. There's also one that was done by the North Texas, Central Texas Council of Governments region that were recommended amendments to the 2015 IECC. These all state, excuse me, that all of North Texas will be considered, it's comment zone 3, but they are going to make the amendment for 5 air changes per hour rather than the 3 for all of North Texas. So there are studies that have been done on the changes in the new codes and how it affects the retailer, the consumer, how possible it is, and whether or not we can stay competitive in a market that most of us have, you know, kind of bowed out of, I guess. So that's really all I have. If y'all want to take a look at these, I have the links. They're all on. There's actually some on the DOE, NTCOG also, all the petitions for all the systems, laboratory systems that do the studies, the baseline reports. So I think that's really all I have. Actually, there's also one other thing, quickly. An ordinance was passed in the city of Austin that allows for batch testing, which means they pull a sample of 15% of the dwelling units that are produced under that code. If it's a new community or, you know, a new development, they pull 15 of those that require the compliance testing. If those pass, then they assume that the remaining are in compliance as well. I mean, that could be something that could be offered that would give us a little bit of relief. Or, I don't know if you're familiar with the Energy Star program for HUD, which is similar. I mean, it requires the same testing, all of the same compliance, but it only requires 4% to be in compliance or to be tested in the field. So, and that's been a program that's, I mean, that's how I got my start kind of in the energy side of it, is testing for that. So, that's all I have. Thank you for your time.
That is all the public comment forms that I have. I know there's other people here. If there was anybody, if there is anyone here who was not aware of the public comment form and would like to be considered, now's your time to say something. You know about the public comment form, Mr. Pendleton.
I had it.
Afternoon, DJ Pendleton, Texas Manufactured Housing Association. Mine is more just a question to the council, whether or not the council feels that they have the authority or ability to make any changes or amendments, flexibilities like some of these other similar adopting jurisdictions. Or if you think that if the ultimate determination, which I don't know, maybe I'm reading too many between the lines, is that the response is going to be that this is a legislative one and one that needs to be taken to those committees, those members, the governor's office, then that direction from this council on the record would be beneficial in those efforts, with the hope that between now and probably earliest passage implementation of a new law would be best case scenario June of 19, that the residential industry doesn't dissipate. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pendleton.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Randy
Mr. Childers.
From a city standpoint, I know the IRC, the way, especially the IRC, the way it was adopted, the legislature allowed cities to make amendments, local amendments, and we Waco and probably Round Rock don't do what some bigger cities, and actually the hot cog that you mentioned in Dallas, that's really a really good group that does a lot of work up there for amendments. We've never tried to amend the IECC. The understanding always has been you'd have to go back through either the Energy Systems Lab at A&M and or SECO. But there are requirements in other ICOs that we've, and I guess it's considered an amendment, but we've just deleted out if we didn't. It didn't fit Waco for whatever the reason. I can't really think of an example right this minute. Yeah, well, but that was a state law, so we didn't have much, there really wasn't much choice on the sprinklers, but there's others that we've just either just amended the section out. Not amended it out, just deleted it out. Just section 102.5 deleted and moved on. I'm not for sure, I don't know how much wiggle room, for lack of a better word, the council has. I don't disagree with the stringentness of 3. That's really tough.
Mary Winston, TDLR. Just for clarification, Mr. Childers' comments are just general comments because for public comment, the council is not allowed to respond. other than for clarification. So thank you for your general comments. And the last gentleman who spoke to this, if you could stay after the end and we could visit a little bit with our Assistant General Counsel and further discuss, that would be great.
Council, anything further? As a member of this council, I appreciate public comment incredibly. I can't stress enough how important it is for industry, for consumers, for anybody interested to find a way to reach out to staff, communicate your specific concerns, recognize that this is kind of like steering an aircraft carrier here. We can't turn on a dime. I personally, professionally, have heard these items, and I want to make sure everybody in the public continues to feel comfortable moving forward. We cannot offer much relief. We cannot offer much information in return, but it's important that you attend these meetings. It's important that you stay abreast. It's important that you offer your communication, preferably through the specific rule review process that's in place. If anybody here has any questions about that rule review process, and you feel your concerns can be addressed during the rule review process, please visit with staff. Please talk to them, engage with them. If you feel you're not getting your concerns addressed, then take it to the next level. Visit. I don't mean to put so much burden on Ms. James and her staff, but visit with them. Continue this discussion. I assure you, you will be heard. There's not anything in anybody's mind up here that would want to do anything to diminish access to consumer products. It's just not the intent. So thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chairman, it's not a burden on us. That's our job. Carla James, TDLR.
With that being said, I'm going to move forward to Agenda Item D. Before I move forward with Agenda Item D, I'd like to take an imposition. I don't think too many will mind, but Mr. Nick Voines mentioned the passing of George Ferry, and I had an opportunity to work with him and visit with him for several years as part of this council. I can tell you, I still recall, and at times I still feel somewhat the intimidation of trying to manage so much of what the information is being presented to us in a highly concentrated way with long periods of time of between these meetings. One of the things that I remember from the very first time was when I first walked into this council was how kind George was, how open he was, how at ease his smile would put me. I want to thank staff for making me aware. I know I was at a job site in El Paso when I received a call from Donna Lipke. Never welcome news, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate you understanding that we feel we've played a role, and we appreciate being informed when we lose somebody who's been such a common figure in what we do here. I had an opportunity to travel to Austin and I think it's fair to say enjoy the commemorative occasion at the state capitol in George's name and most importantly in remembrance of him and in support of his wife and his life. One of the things that I just caught me by surprise, quite honestly, that I wanted to make sure everybody else had an opportunity to know about George. Of all the things that I would have never imagined George's involvement would have been in, was he was instrumental in the implementation of our Texas accessibility standards. And what an uphill battle what a long battle and what a successful battle. I can tell you, in light of the discussions of new codes and new implementations and how difficult it seems to be today, this must have been similar grounds for George back when this program was implemented, and it's important to recognize the achievements of individuals that for no other reason than they honestly believe in service of others, in service of the public. And I wanted council to know a little bit more about who George was and what he was able to implement professionally. I think it was a wonderful presentation of his life and in great support of his wife and his family. For that, if I may, call for a moment of silence in remembering George. Thank you, Tol. Council, if I may, very excitedly move on to agenda item number D, election of a new chair and vice chair. I appreciate the opportunity to serve in this capacity and to serve in the broader capacity of the council, and thank you to all for that. At this time, if I can have a motion to nominate a new chair, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, is that because you don't want to continue?
No, thank you. It is because I think new blood and new organization and new efforts is constantly welcomed, and so.
Has anyone else prescribed interest?
Absolutely, and if council will allow, I'd be happy to nominate somebody. So if I may, I've appreciated his council, his involvement, and his continued interest. I'd like to nominate Mr. Roland Brown as chair of the IHB Council.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. If there isn't any further discussion, how about a vote? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Brown? You lost that one, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Of course, please.
I'd like to ask for a motion to select a vice chair.
By all means.
I would like to put forth Randy Childers' name as vice chair to the Texas Industrialized Building Code Council.
We have a motion. Do we have a motion to elect Mr. Childers as vice chair of the IHB Council? Any
second.
discussion? I just wanted to hear that real quick before.
No discussion.
No discussion. I have a motion and a second from Mr. Fitzpatrick. Is that correct?
Yes.
I've got a motion and a second nominating Mr. Randy Childers for vice chair of the IHB Council. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And again, Mr. Childers, you lost that one. Thank you. So now that concludes agenda item E with the election of Mr. Roland Brown as our new chair for the upcoming meeting and Mr. Randy Childers as our vice chair. We're running to agenda item J, recommendations for agenda items for next council meeting. The sprint is on.
All right, I'm used to these shoes.
Yes, ma'am.
So, I know we have continuation of the rule review process, and you talked about a presentation on the component portion. We may have to go outside of our staff to get help on that, to do that, because we don't see a lot of that yet. Is there anything else?
There was a discussion on trying to identify if there was a consistency or a repetitiveness in some of the complaints that were being forwarded to
yes.
enforcement.
Common violations.
Violations?
Thank you.
Mr. scoot back.
Yeah,
so
go
I can-
ahead.
So I can ask Mr. Chair if I can speak. Mr. Chair, can I speak for a second?
Yes,
I just
please.
didn't get out of the way. Randy Childers. I think what we're looking for is, or 90% of them, 90% of the complaints, foundation, or 5% systems, or 5% something. I mean, I think that's what we're kind of wondering, almost kind of like a top 5, top 6. Just what are, especially the major complaints that you receive? It sounded like through a conversation during the meeting, Donna pretty much said it was the installation, which sounded like that related a lot to foundation. I think that's what we're asking for.
Okay.
I don't think we're asking for a long, voluminous report. I think we're just asking for some of that kind of information is what I gathered.
Okay.
All of this with the hopes of, if it's something that the industry is just not informing themselves well enough, or not having enough continuing education on, something that we can help staff highlight some of the common mistakes and try to bridge that somehow. What else, gentlemen?
I would like a continual report on the file FTP site progress, because I know that's important to you guys. And two, if I can ask, if legal finds any avenue that we can discuss relative to the energy code issue on the residential side, just to keep us informed, because I think that's where that answer's got to come from, if there is any possibility of an answer.
Anything else? I think we have quite a bit, actually, but is there anything else?
I think that's about it. If anything else comes up, by all means, call
Yeah.
Roland.
I will.
Discussion, moving on to agenda item K, discussion of date, time, and location for next council meeting.
Hey, Mr. Chair, Randy Childers, I have a question. I know we've changed members several times. Is 1 o'clock still good? Seems awful late, especially on a Friday. I'm being very selfish. I'm probably one of the, I guess there's a couple of us that have to go back north. And for anybody who's been north from Austin through close, even to Waco past there, I almost agreed to all night, because it's probably going to be that anyway by the time we get started. And I know we've had some that have come from much further away, and I understand the 1 o'clock, but I don't know noon, maybe not earlier than noon, but I think that hour would make
I can offer that 1 o'clock, I think, was brought up in part at my request, just trying to drive up here. It's roughly a 6-hour drive from the Rio Grande Valley, and I still have a 6-hour drive back. And 1 o'clock allows me to get here on time, and unfortunately gets me home somewhat late. But we can find a way.
I'm just throwing it out there.
No, trust me, I appreciate it, because I
don't have near as far to go as you do.
No, but we still have the same traffic, whether you're going up and I'm going down.
Yeah, we don't like this traffic either, going home.
So, yeah, if the answer is let's get it done earlier, we will, and I can come in the night before. It's not that.
Yeah, it's going to be up to you guys what time. So I prefer mornings myself, but that didn't work for the council, so.
Mr. Chairmans. Doug Robinson, I would suggest that we kind of talk amongst not only us, but others on email every time, see if we can all make it work. I know.
Well, actually, Mary Winston, that's polling, can't do that. But
Not
it's
even
a
meeting
quorum.
time?
Not even meeting time. But however, you can coordinate with Ms. Tamala Fletcher.
Oh.
And she will make sure that you're not violating any quorums, and we can ask that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For the sake of that effort, if I may, to Ms. Fletcher, whatever fits the council and staff best, I will accommodate.
Doug
And-
Robinson. I was thinking there were some flight times that people couldn't get to the airport and get here in time on the same day.
There.
So,
Blended
Carla
approach.
James, TDLR members, you all do not have to set it today. If some other discussions need to happen, we can certainly, Tamala can work with you all to ensure that we're not violating Open Meetings Act, and then we can set it and get information out, if that's preferable.
Thank you, Ms. James. Any
That's
further?
typically what we do with the date anyway. We don't usually set a date today.
Well, do you want to try for 6 months like we did last time, though?
Yes.
Around 6 months?
If that,
I would prefer 6 months.
absolutely,
Yeah.
Out here.
at the
Okay.
latest.
I'd like to see us get into the habit of every 6 months we get together.
Mary
1 year is
Winston,
too far.
TDLR, with work groups in between.
Right.
Yes, definitely.
That would be
Anything,
July.
anything further on item K? Then with that, thank you guys all so much, and we will now adjourn, unless there's any further discussion, the January 26th, 2018 meeting of the Texas Industrialized Building Code Council. Thank you all.